Hello, everyone. How's it going? Excuse me. Surprise, surprise, I'm back for a morning stream yet again. This is rough. Not used to waking up early on a consistent basis. But yeah, today, more Defunctland, aka Can We Blame Eisner? Probably. Let's get to it. Failure of Hong Kong Disneyland. I wasn't even aware there was a Hong Kong
When it
Disneyland.
comes to your wellness routine.
Nope. You get no ad time.
On September 30th, 2005, Michael Eisner officially left the Walt Disney Company. He formally resigned as a member of the board and as the company's chief executive. His successor, Bob Iger, had been running the company for the past 6 months as he transitioned into his new role. Eisner's departure was not front-page news. The climax of the events leading to his resignation had long played out, and all that was left was for him to pack up his things and go home. He refused questions from the press, and he only left behind a one-page career retrospective to be published in the company's newsletter. Those close to the executive explained that Eisner was not ready to give up his job at Disney, and that he was most worried about his legacy at the company. The second half of his 21-year tenure, especially the past few years, had certainly clouded what was one of the greatest corporate success stories of all time. How, then, did it come to this? To understand that, we'll need to go back a bit.
The big cheese. I'm not the big. I wish I was the big cheese. This is the big cheese.
Et maintenant, je déclare Euro Disney officiellement ouvert.
Okay, season 2 of Defunctland, I get it. Oh, forgot. Full screen. And lockdown, that's it, maybe.
On November 1st, 1999, the government of Hong Kong announced that a deal had been reached with the Walt Disney Company to bring a Disney resort to the autonomous territory. Hong Kong was relying on the new resort to help the recovery of its struggling economy, and they were certain that a Disney park would increase tourism and create new jobs. The Walt Disney Company was silent on the matter, although a spokesperson had confirmed a few months earlier in March that Disney was considering expanding internationally into Hong Kong. If the plans were to come to fruition, it would be the company's third international resort after Tokyo and Paris. At this time, the Walt Disney Company still saw expansion as a viable option. Many in the company, including Eisner, felt that Disney had not properly capitalized off of the immense success of the studio's recent animated films. However, it wasn't from a lack of trying. The failure of Euro Disneyland in France and the inability to build Disney's America in Virginia had turned Eisner away from big-budget expansion projects in the parks. On top of this, Eisner struggled to secure a steady management team. The death of Disney president Frank Wells, the departure of Walt Disney Studios president Jeffrey Katzenberg, and the hiring and subsequent firing of talent agent and Eisner's personal friend Michael Ovitz had left Eisner as a lone wolf at the top of the company. All he had to hold on to was the most lucrative executive contract in the business, an extension as chief executive he had signed a few years earlier, guaranteeing his position at the company until 2006. With an annual salary of $750,000 and stock options with a projected value of $771 million, Eisner had significant insurance on his job, as Disney could not afford another high-cost severance package after spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the departure of Katzenberg and Ovitz. This would help Eisner greatly as Disney entered the new millennium. After Disney's acquisition of Capital Cities ABC.
Oh, so that's why they couldn't get rid of him. He was already locked in a contract and everything, and they wanted to get him out of it. It would cost them a fortune. That's why they couldn't get rid of him.
Was completed in 1996, Disney officially became the largest media company in the world, passing Time Warner. This also meant that Eisner now had to keep an eye on the company's film division, television division, and theme park division. Walt Disney Pictures was, in retrospect, ending its Renaissance era of hit animated films. Tarzan, released in the summer of 1999, would end the second half of Disney's most financially successful era. Disney's post-Renaissance would bring films such as Fantasia 2000, Dinosaur, The Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis: The Lost Empire, Lilo and Stitch, and Treasure Planet within just a few years. Some of these films were well received by critics and audiences, but all but Lilo and Stitch and Dinosaur were considered box office failures. The films slated for after 2002 would produce similar if not worse results, and the success of Pixar and DreamWorks Animation would demote Walt Disney Animation to third place, an outcome unimaginable as the company had enjoyed a monopoly over the medium for over 6 decades. The company's new stake in the television business was not going as planned either. Eisner and Disney were having trouble putting together a successful primetime programming block, and ABC was relying on the newly produced US version of the British game show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, to compete
that
in the
was
ratings.
originally
One
British?
positive of the
I
merger
didn't
was
know.
Robert Iger, the COO and president of Capital Cities ABC. The young executive impressed Eisner, although we worried that Iger lacked the necessary creative skills to run a company such as Disney. Iger would become the president of the Walt Disney Company in early 2000. The position had been left vacant since the departure of Ovitz. Finally, the theme park division was not thriving in the way that many thought it should, and much of the expansion and renovations promised 10 years earlier to be part of Eisner's Disney Decade Plan had not come to fruition. Eisner had been able to add additional parks in both Orlando and Anaheim, adding Disney's Animal Kingdom to the Walt Disney World Resort in the spring of 1998, and beginning construction on Disney's California Adventure to create the Disneyland Resort in January of that year. Also, plans for a second park in the Paris resort were revived, and the development of Walt Disney Studios Park began. On top of these, a second park for the successful Tokyo Disneyland Resort was also in development. His most recent attempt at an expansion outside of the existing resorts was Disney Regional Entertainment, 3 entertainment chains to debut in multiple cities throughout the US. The flagship concept, the virtual reality arcade Disney Quest, had just opened its Chicago location in the summer of 1999. Now, with rumors of a third international park in Hong Kong circulating, it seemed that Eisner was ready to test expansion again. On November 2, 1999, the day after the news broke that a deal had been reached between Hong Kong and Disney, representatives from both parties officially announced that a Hong Kong Disney resort would be constructed. The treatment Disney received in France after the announcement of Euro Disneyland was quite different than the reaction they received in Hong Kong. While Disney had the support of a few French contractors and a few government officials, it seemed that the overwhelming majority of citizens aggressively rejected the prospect of Disney coming to their country. Hong Kong had the exact opposite reaction. They hailed Disney's arrival, treating them as an economic savior of sorts, lauding Disney and proclaiming that the theme park would rescue them from their prolonged recession. A few in the local media were
So they
skeptical,
wanted
using the
Disney
same talking
here
points
this
that Disney
time.
had to fight against any time they attempted to build a new park outside of Orlando or Tokyo. This could easily be compiled into a greatest hits by the opposition album. Now that's what I call a good reason to reject a Disney theme park. Here are a few. The government will spend taxpayer money to subsidize and incentivize Disney to come to the area. In the case of Hong Kong, estimates said that this could be around $2.6 billion, a commitment that Hong Kong officials used to lure Disney away from a park in mainland China. The employment benefits that the park will bring after the construction will be low-wage, part-time jobs. While discussed during the time of the Hong Kong Disney announcement, the consensus was that given Hong Kong's struggling economy that any jobs would be a good thing. Finally, that the positive economic impact promised by Disney is overstated, and that the subsidies given to the park will offset any financial benefit to come from it. The small opposition did bring up these points, but overall, Hong Kong seemed welcoming of Disney, expecting them to bring 1.2 million additional tourists and spark an annual GDP growth of almost 0.5%. The site for the park was to be located on Penny's Bay, a northeast section of Hong Kong's largest island, Lantau Island. After rumors of the new Disney resort began to circulate, local archaeologists went to the island to search for and remove any artifacts before Disney's arrival.
Probably a
Disney's new
good
Hong Kong
idea.
resort was set to open in 2005,
Probably a good idea.
so development began immediately. This resulted in Disney's California Adventure, Walt Disney Studios Paris, Tokyo Disney Sea, and Disney's Hong Kong Resort being constructed at the same time. Eisner and other executives were wary of spending
The
too much on
same
3 of the
time?
4 new parks. Disney Sea's development and construction was conducted by the Oriental Land Company, the independent Japanese company that pays Disney royalties and contracts its Imagineers. Finances were rarely an issue in Tokyo, unlike in the United States, France, and now Hong Kong. In 2000, Disney began clearing the land in order to build the park. The dredging upset local fishermen and environmental groups. They petitioned the government of Hong Kong to stop the development, claiming that Disney was in violation of their agreement, as the dredging had been killing many of the fish in the bay. Hong Kong shrugged off the accusations toward Disney, telling those concerned that the amount of fish being killed was generally in line with what they expected. The same year, Eisner commented on the troubling amount of air pollution in Hong Kong, which the government quickly assured him they were fixing. This would be the beginning of what could only be described as an awkward
What
relationship
kind of
between Disney and Hong
picture
Kong.
is this?
On February 8, 2001, Disney California Adventure opened to mostly negative reviews. Visitors disliked the budget park, citing the lack of attractions and the terrifyingly poor quality of the existing ones.
Oh,
Executives were
Superstar
worried that the small
Limo. We
park's
all
main
remember
issue would
that,
be its
don't we?
limited capacity. But as it turned out, this wouldn't be an issue at all. Attendance was poor out of the gate. This, combined with the potential of an economic recession, sent Disney into a panic over the future of California Adventure and the 3 other parks currently in construction. Despite these concerns, it appeared as though Eisner was planning for even more international expansion. In the summer of 2001, an article released by the Beijing Evening News reported that Disney was planning to build a park in the capital city in time for the 2008 Olympics. This infuriated Hong Kong officials. If another Disney park were to open in China, it would destroy Hong Kong Disney's chances at attracting mainland tourists and becoming a premier vacation destination. After the outrage made its way to Eisner, he announced that Disney would not open another park in China for at least 8 years, that the company was 100% focused on Hong Kong, and that in the event that Disney did build a park in mainland China, it would most likely be in Shanghai and not Beijing, a clarification that seemed to prove Disney's desire for a new park. Later that year, the terrorist attacks of September 11th triggered an economic downturn, and the tourism industry saw the worst of it, with many across the United States and the world afraid to travel. On top of this, rumors circulated that Disney's theme parks could be a target for terrorists. This did not bode well for the struggling parks division and the company as a whole. Each division of the company seemed to be in major trouble. This brought more budget cuts at the parks and more projects in development being canceled. Hong Kong Disney was too far into development to be stopped, but the Walt Disney Company's financial struggles removed any possibility of a budget increase for the park. In 2002, the rumors of a park in Shanghai resurfaced, with Disney refusing to comment. Hong Kong officials and residents were once again outraged. By now, they were expecting half of Hong Kong Disney's visitors to be from mainland China, and the region had already poured $2 billion of public funds into constructing the park and improving surrounding infrastructure in preparation for its opening. Analysts estimated that it would take 13 years after opening for Hong Kong Disney to offset construction costs, and if a park in Shanghai opened during that time, there would be little to no chance of a return on the investment. The park was to begin construction the next year, and Hong Kong continued to beg Disney to not commit to a park in mainland China. Before the construction of the park began, workers still dredging the water surrounding the Hong Kong Disney site encountered something peculiar in the bay. Dozens of bombs buried in the ocean floor were now exposed.
What?
Local bomb experts were accused of underestimating the amount of shells and explosives left over from World War II.
Oh.
The bomb experts assured Disney and the workers that bombs that old won't go off, although they did mention that sometimes they do. Crews continued dredging, a bit more carefully than before. At the same time as this, an outbreak of the severe acute respiratory syndrome virus, known as SARS, took the lives of nearly 800 people, with the majority of reported cases coming from southern China. The disease eventually spread to Hong Kong in February of 2003, terrifying public and health officials. Travel was discouraged as containment efforts intensified, with Hong Kong at the center of the epidemic, which did not bode well for the Disney park under construction. Thankfully for the health of the people of the affected regions and also beneficial for the new Disney park, Hong Kong was removed from the World Health Organization's affected areas in June 2003, and the outbreak was classified as contained in July. This greatly impacted Hong Kong's economic recovery, and officials were banking on the Disney park to restore tourism to the region more than ever.
Wix
Ah.
gives you the power of
Help.
AI to build the
No AI. AI, go away. Sorry, Skynet, but you're not popular right now. Oh wait, did I unmute yet? No.
Walt Disney, son of Roy O. Disney, chairman of Walt Disney Animation and vice chairman of the Walt Disney Company's board of directors, resigned from his position. Stanley Gold, another Disney board member and an ally of Roy, resigned from his position as well. These two had one goal with their resignation: to take down Michael Eisner. In a
Our
letter addressed to Eisner and
heroes.
sent to the press, Roy explained his issues with the executive. He pointed to Eisner's conduct with the ousting of board member Andrea Vandekamp, who was vocal about her displeasure with the direction of the company. Roy accused Eisner of stacking the board in his favor and ousting anyone that didn't agree with his ideas. In the letter, he outlined 7 main reasons for his resignation and why Eisner should be removed from his position. Number 1, Eisner and Bob Iger's inability to develop successful programming for ABC. Number 2, Eisner's micromanagement of those around him. Number 3, the loss of quality in the parks. Roy mentions the theme parks built on the cheap, specifically citing Disney's California Adventure, Walt Disney Studios Paris, and the upcoming Hong Kong Disneyland. Number 4, the decrease in value of the Disney brand as a result of money grubbing and lack of creative direction. Roy claimed that the public perception was that Disney was always trying to make a quick buck. Number 5, the discouragement of creativity and art produced in the past few years. Number 6, Eisner's inability to build and maintain relationships with Disney's creative partners, emphasizing Pixar, which at the time was unhappy with the Disney partnership for a multitude of reasons. Months after this, Pixar would announce an end to their distribution partnership with Disney, turning many more against Eisner and Disney's management team. Number 7, Eisner's refusal to discuss succession. In the letter, Roy also specifically referenced the death of Frank Wells, and Eisner's inability to run the company without his partner, a common belief among employees that infuriated Eisner. This was the start of Roy and Gold's Save Disney campaign, an expensive and elaborate effort to oust Eisner and his management team through appealing to shareholders and, if it came to it, legal action. Roy used the legacy of his father and his uncle Walt to his advantage. urging shareholders to preserve the magic of the company. He specifically appealed to cast members and the smaller shareholders that invested in the company not just to make a profit, but to be a part of the magic that it creates. Eisner and management brushed off Roy's efforts as a political stunt, and many within the company believed Roy's issues were personal, and that by taking them public, he was only making matters worse for Disney. They also pointed out that many of the moves Roy and Gold cited as failures of management were decisions that they approved as board members. Roy admitted that he had given management the benefit of the doubt too many times, but that his campaign was to prevent the company from continuing its string of failures. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, the alleged budget park was still being constructed, now being used as an example of mismanagement in the company years before its opening. The question sparked by Roy's allegations is, how do you build a budget Disney theme park? The parks are known for their spare no expense immersion and attention to detail. This results in attractions costing tens of millions of dollars to build, and potentially billions for an entire park. How can you build a well-themed immersive environment cheaply? As Eisner proved, it was actually pretty simple. It all comes down to choosing the right theme. If you want to build a faraway land with detailed dark rides that take you on adventures beyond one person's wildest dreams, then it's next to impossible to do it on the cheap. The key is to pick a theme that is easy and low cost to deliver to its full extent. For instance, choosing a county fair, a pier amusement park, or a carnival as a themed land in the parks is a great way to operate multiple rides without having to build immersive theming. Any poor craftsmanship or lack of effort fits that theme perfectly. Another example is theming a section of the park or the entire thing to Hollywood. This saves a lot of money when it comes to set dressing attractions. There's no need to build your roller coaster in a beautifully sculpted mountain. Instead, build it in a large tan box, and spray paint studio in a few of the corners. It doesn't cost nearly as much, and it technically delivers on the promised theming of studios. In the case of Hong Kong Disneyland, how would one save money on something as crucial as the park's central icon, for instance? Certainly, there wouldn't be any way to avoid spending whatever is necessary to ensure that the center of the park is the most beautiful and well-themed section. Except, there was. The solution to the issue of the expensive icon was claiming nostalgia and creating a tribute to the original Disneyland castle, the smallest of any of the Magic Kingdom Park castles by a long shot. This would not be the only area where the company would save money, but being the icon, it would be the most obvious. This was the corporate mindset with which Hong Kong Disneyland was built.
Oh, yeah.
On March 3, 2004, the Walt Disney Company held their annual
definitely
shareholders
blame
meeting in
Eisner for
Philadelphia.
this one.
Just a few weeks prior, Comcast had made a surprise bid to acquire the Walt Disney Company, catching both Disney and the media off guard. Disney was struggling, but the company had just released a strong first quarter earnings report, and they were coming off of a successful slate of films in 2003. The seemingly random bid raised the stakes for the shareholders meeting. While Disney had expressed no interest in the merger, this strengthened Roy's argument to preserve the soul of the company, which would certainly be destroyed if it were absorbed into a large media conglomerate. At the same time, it provided management with a lot of options, including a potential graceful escape plan for Eisner should he approve the merger. Everyone was present at the shareholders meeting. Roy gave a passionate speech on his Save Disney campaign, which was met with thunderous applause and a standing ovation. Eisner's speech spoke of the company's success and its future, and he claimed that the points Roy were making were exaggerated or simply untrue. The applause he received was described as light. It then came time to read the re-election vote for the board of directors. Roy was hoping for around 20% of shareholders to withhold their votes for Eisner's re-election, which would have been a strong vote of no confidence in the chairman and CEO. Once the votes were tallied, Eisner jokingly tried to adjourn the meeting. After howls of protest, he said, quote, "I almost got away with that." The results of the votes were then read. For Roy, the news was far greater than he could have imagined. For Eisner, it was far worse. 43.4% of shareholders withheld their votes to re-elect Eisner to the board. An opposition vote of that magnitude was unprecedented, with only a handful of comparable examples in the history of corporate America.
Good
It was
job,
later revealed
Roy.
that over 70% of cast members voted against Eisner, indicating how pay cuts and budgeting in the parks was affecting the morale of the company as a whole. After the vote, Eisner was stripped of his role of chairman of the board, retaining his seat and his position as CEO. Eisner had suggested the idea of him resigning as chairman far before the meeting, but it was a strong indication that Eisner's days at the company were numbered.
Indeed.
All of us
Indeed.
at the Walt Disney Company are thankful for having the opportunity to create for the people of Hong Kong and China a Disneyland of their own. With Chinese New Year just around the corner, I wanted to be the first one to say, Kung Hei Fat Choi. Thank you.
Later in 2004, it was announced that Hong Kong Disneyland would open on September 12, 2005. The company discussed Hong Kong's excitement for the new park, and how it would focus on bringing the American entertainment experience to the region, closer to the strategy for Tokyo Disneyland as opposed to Euro Disneyland. Still, they were careful to incorporate the area's distinct culture,
The feng
hiring a
shui.
professional feng shui consultant to ensure that the park would provide a familiar and harmonious layout to its guests. The coming year was shaping up to be a big one for Disney parks, with both the opening of the Hong Kong Disneyland Resort and Disneyland's 50th anniversary celebrations. On September 10, 2004, Eisner wrote a formal letter to Disney's board of directors announcing his intent to leave Disney after his contract expired on September 30, 2006. The move was merely a formality, as it was clear that the board would not renew Eisner's contract anyways. He also endorsed Bob Iger as his successor, although an outside search was launched by the board. Many, including Eisner, questioned whether or not he would remain on the company's board, but after deliberation on the issue, it became clear that he would have a complete exit from the company. Roy and Gold continued their
Oh,
campaign,
thank goodness.
claiming that Eisner's resignation letter was a well-calculated move to hand CEO duties to his ally, Iger, and that he might still try to retain power in the company. They urged the board to end his contract a year early, removing Eisner from the company in 2005. The board refused the request, but they did ensure that a successor would be chosen by the summer of the next year. On March 14, 2005, Disney's board unanimously voted to select Bob Iger as Eisner's successor. The selection process was quite controversial, with Roy and Gold criticizing the decision to appoint Iger and the lack of outside candidates. The search was made more difficult by Eisner's insistence to be present during every interview, a situation that turned many potential candidates away. There was some good news for Roy and Gold, as with the announcement of Iger's promotion, it was revealed that Eisner would retire a year earlier than expected on September 30, 2005, coincidentally 3 weeks after the opening of Hong Kong Disneyland. Iger would take over day-to-day CEO duties, while Eisner would assist him with the transition. In June of 2005, environmentalists objected to Disney's plan to serve shark fin soup at wedding banquets held at the resort. Despite the dish being a traditional Chinese cuisine, activists were worried about the declining shark population and the animal abuse conducted in order to obtain a shark's fin, which included fishermen pulling sharks out of the water, cutting off their fin, and throwing them back into the ocean to die. Disney attempted to find an environmentally sustainable way to provide the dish, but a study revealed that no such options were available. The park took the dish off the menu and stated that they would only serve it for parties that specifically requested it. On top of this, they would provide those that ordered the dish with a pamphlet explaining the horrors committed in order to make the meal possible, which would have certainly been a hit among newlyweds. Even with these accommodations, activists would not back down, and Disney decided to not serve shark fin soup whatsoever. The month after the shark fin backlash, a news report broke claiming that Disney had rounded up and killed nearly 50 stray dogs that had been roaming around the Hong Kong Disney site. The headlines were sensationalized, as Disney merely called in government dog catchers who took the strays immediately to a shelter. The shelter, having no time to find homes for the animals, were only able to relocate 3 of the 45 dogs, giving lethal injections to the remaining 42. Media also reported that some of the dogs were unofficial guard dogs used by construction workers, but both Disney and the construction company denied these allegations, instead claiming that the dogs, traveling in packs, put crews in dangerous situations. The bad press, deserved or not, was just the beginning, as these types of negative reports on Hong Kong Disney would increase exponentially as the park's September opening neared. On August 19, 2005, reports were released accusing Disney of running manufacturing plants in mainland China that overworked and underpaid employees, reportedly compensating some 33 cents an hour, which was 9 cents under China's minimum wage of 42 cents an hour. Disney promised to investigate the matter, while the factories denied the allegations. On August 27, 2005, Hong Kong actor Daniel Wu voiced opposition to the park and announced a personal boycott. He claimed that when him and the other stars were filming a promo for the park, the American workers were disrespectful to them.
Daniel
A
Wu,
spokesperson for Hong Kong Disneyland chalked the incident up to miscommunication and hoped that everyone would come to the park themselves to see the fantastic service. On September 4th, Hong Kong Disneyland held a rehearsal day, bringing in 29,000 guests to test attractions and traffic flow. The event was created to avoid an opening day disaster like Disneyland's 50 years prior, but it actually achieved the opposite. The day was a disaster. Guests waited in some lines for hours just to have the ride break down, and the park's restaurants did not have nearly enough seats to accommodate the crowds. It certainly didn't help that Hong Kong Disneyland was the smallest Magic Kingdom-style park ever created. While some early concept work showed a more ambitious version of the park, the budget park seemed that it was going to live up to its title. It also appeared that Disney was planning to expand the resort before they expanded the park, pre-planning for a second gate and more hotels. Weeks before opening, a case of food poisoning at the park made its way into the news. Worse, when Hong Kong authorities came to investigate, Disney security demanded that they remove parts of their uniform before entering. When the story broke, Hong Kong residents were outraged, and there was potential that Hong Kong authorities would pursue legal action over the encounter. Luckily, the park's opening would overshadow the incident. Before the opening, Disney seemed anxious to distance themselves from the past year of controversy and to see just how well their budget park would perform.
Need inspiration? Shop Ralph's for over 30,000
Nope.
去迪士尼做足準備。迪士尼樂園9月12號開幕啦，記住訂定飛喎。到時有好多交通工具俾你揀，記得提醒內地親友最好經羅湖過關，避開繁忙嘅時間，同埋喺度留多幾日。香港有好多嘢玩㗎，計劃行程記得睇埋呢個網址或者打呢個熱線。迪士尼做足準備，玩得開心至勝得你。
On September 12th, 2005, the Hong Kong Disneyland Resort officially opened to the public. Both Iger and Eisner were in attendance for the big day. Reportedly, while Iger was watching the opening day parade, he noticed that children responded to the featured Pixar characters more than they did to the classic Disney animated characters. This realization fueled Iger to repair Disney's relationship with Pixar, which he would do less than 6 months later by acquiring the computer animation company. Hong Kong Disneyland featured only 4 themed lands: Main Street USA, Adventureland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland. The park advertised 22 attractions, including Autopia, which would not open until 2006. For reference, this is about half of the attractions currently offered at the Magic Kingdom. Of these 22 attractions, one was City Hall and Guest Relations, and another was the Main Street Vehicles. Another was a large set of tiki statues that sprayed guests with water. Sleeping Beauty Castle and a Snow White-themed wishing well were another 2. The Railroad and its only stop in Fantasyland were listed separately. Of the remaining 15 attractions, 2 were live shows found elsewhere: Festival of the Lion King from Animal Kingdom and the Golden Mickeys from Disney Cruise Line. In Adventureland, Tarzan's Treehouse and the rafts to get to Tarzan's Treehouse were listed separately. In Fantasyland, there was Mickey's Philharmagic and a character meet and greet. The remaining 9 attractions would be considered by guests to be the park's only rides. This included the Jungle Cruise, the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, Dumbo the Flying Elephant, Cinderella Carousel, Mad Hatter Teacups, Orbitron, Space Mountain, Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, and the soon-to-open Autopia. And that was it. No Peter Pan's Flight, no Pirates of the Caribbean, and no Big Thunder Mountain. The Scamp Park was more fleshed out than Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris upon its opening, but Hong Kong Disneyland was no doubt made with a similar financial hold. This is not the fault of the Imagineers or the cast members. Those designing and operating the park were still able to create a sense of magic and add beautiful features and flourishes despite the financial restrictions, and the park was a huge success in delivering the perfect mix of American and Chinese culture. However, executives couldn't care less about how the park looked on the guide map. They were focused on how the park looked financially. The head of attendance calculating at the Walt Disney Company estimated that 5.6 million people would visit the park in this first year, with around 10 million visiting every year after that. Hong Kong's population was only 6.8 million in 2005, so the park was relying on 2/3 of its estimated visitors to come from mainland China and other countries in Asia. Right out of the gate, things were not looking good. Quite the opposite, really. Despite the worries of Disney executives and Hong Kong officials that the park's low capacity would result in unmanageable crowds, the park's opening week attendance did not meet predictions. An indicator of the weak performance was the resort's inability to fill the rooms in its 2 on-property hotels, a similar issue faced in Paris. For Hong Kong, this meant that mainland and international tourists were not showing up in droves, and it seemed that locals were not about to make up the difference. The month after the park opened, an employee climbed to the top of Space Mountain, threatening to take his own life. Luckily, the attempt was thwarted. However, an opinion poll following the incident revealed the extent to which the public relations nightmares that the park had endured were affecting the public's perception of the resort. 24% of those polled by Asian trade magazine media reported that they had a negative view of Hong Kong Disneyland. Only 42% claimed that their view was positive. The negative publicity, combined with high ticket prices, Hong Kong's struggling economy, a lack of attachment to Mickey and Company by the people of China, and a lack of attractions revealed how much trouble the park could be in. Worst of all, Hong Kong Disney was having a difficult time competing with the nearby Ocean Park, which saw a jump in attendance after Hong Kong Disney opened. And visitor numbers seemed even between the two, with the possibility that Ocean Park was doing better. As if things couldn't get any worse, Hong Kong Disney finally saw the crowd that officials had been fearing. During the Chinese Lunar New Year festival, a swarm of guests crowded the park. Hong Kong Disneyland hit capacity day after day during the festivities, doubling its regular crowd size. Disney, not anticipating the crowds, did not have special holiday tickets, and crowds of guests with valid entry passes were turned away at the gates. Furious over being denied entry, many engaged in screaming matches with the cast members and the police, while a few took a more active response and tried to scale the park's fences. This brought more bad press for Hong Kong Disneyland, and park officials apologized profusely, issuing official statements almost every day of the festivities. A simple special event ticket would be required the following year to avoid a similar disaster, but the damage had already been done to the struggling park. Hong Kong Disney's first year underperformed, with 5.2 million guests visiting the park, nearly 500,000 short of projections. The news would only get worse from there. The projected attendance in 2006 of 10 million visitors was a bit off. The actual attendance was even lower than the first year, at 4.17 million visitors. In 2 years, the park had created a $200 million deficit. Hong Kong legislators began to publicly criticize the park's poor performance. Hong Kong owned 57% of the park, with Disney owning the rest. With an initial cost of $3.5 billion and a large deficit, the park's debt was just going to keep growing. Disney was already making attempts to remedy the lack of attractions. 4 new shows and the classic boat ride, It's a Small World, were set to open in 2008. This boosted attendance slightly, however it was not enough. Disney and Hong Kong knew that they had to do something big to save the resort, especially since a deal
what?
between Disney and Shanghai was close to being reached. The solution was a $465 million expansion to Hong Kong Disney. This would add up to 30 new attractions to the small park and 3 new lands: Mystic Point, Grizzly Gulch, and Toy Story Land. This would also increase Disney's stake in Hong Kong Disneyland from 43% to 48%, with Hong Kong's falling from 57% to 52%. Toy Story Land would be the first to open, debuting on November 17, 2011. The park was a near clone of the quick fix land that had opened at Walt Disney Studios Park a year prior. Both feature small carnival attractions themed to the Toy Story franchise. On July 14, 2012, Grizzly Gulch opened with a new roller coaster, the Big Grizzly Mountain Runaway Mine Cars. A unique spin on both Frontierland and its famous e-ticket, Big Thunder Mountain, Big Grizzly Mountain featured audio animatronic bears, changes in direction, and a launch. The new additions brought great news for both Hong Kong's government and Disney. The resort had finally turned an annual profit. The new attractions motivated attendance to jump to 6.7 million guests, and the resort was poised to climb its way out of its debt. There was only one issue. The long-rumored Shanghai Disneyland project had been approved, and it was set to open in 2016. This meant that fewer mainland guests would visit Hong Kong as the date approached. The bad news, while expected, put a damper on the park's recent success. All Hong Kong could do was continue its expansion with unique attractions and hope that guests would continue to travel to the resort. On May 17, 2013, Mystic Point opened with its signature attraction, Mystic Manor. The ride takes the place of the Haunted Mansion found at other Disney parks. Due to Chinese traditions and censorship laws restricting depictions of the supernatural, the popular dark ride featuring departed spirits cannot be cloned to the resort. The new ride, Mystic Manor, told the story of Lord Henry Mystic and his monkey Albert. When Albert opens Mystic's music box, the house comes to life. The trackless dark ride is one of the best attractions ever created by Disney. It was a hit among guests and solidified the park's expansion as an overwhelming success. 2013's profit was even higher than 2012's, and it would be even higher in 2014. Unfortunately, this was the last year of profit that Hong Kong Disneyland has seen to date. Shanghai Disneyland opened on June 16, 2016. The high-capacity park boasted state-of-the-art rides and unique attractions. Unlike the budget park built in Hong Kong and possibly learning from its mistakes, Disney in Shanghai spared no expense, and it reflected in attendance. In its first year, over 11 million guests visited Shanghai Disneyland. The park's massive success was one of the main factors in the loss of profits in Hong Kong. In 2015, 2016, and 2017, the park reported increasing losses, despite revenue being up as of recent. This is partly due to the cost of expansion, including a third resort hotel and the new simulator, the Iron Man Experience, both of which opened in 2017. A new Moana stage show opened in 2018, a new Ant-Man and the Wasp ride opening in March of 2019, replacing Buzz Lightyear Astro Blasters, a Frozen-themed land, and another Marvel attraction to be opened within the next few years, and perhaps the most symbolic of the park's transformation, a new castle. The small Sleeping Beauty castle would be renovated and built to a much larger and more elaborate centerpiece. This seems to mark the end to Hong Kong Disneyland's years as a budget park, and while the resort will most likely continue to report losses during the $1.4 billion expansion, there is hope for Disney's worst-performing Magic Kingdom. The expensive reimagining of the park is a typical strategy used under CEO Bob Iger, and he has had to conduct similar financial rescues with Disney California Adventure and Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris. Large price tags have never scared Iger during his years at the helm, and it is too early to see the return on some of these investments or evaluate Iger's strategies as a whole. It is possible, however, with his predecessor. Since Michael Eisner left Disney in September of 2005, he has continued his entertainment career, albeit on a much smaller scale. He has funded a few TV shows, including the successful Netflix animated comedy BoJack Horseman, and his investment company recently bought the Portsmouth Football Club. He left a mixed legacy at Disney. He no doubt saved the company from takeover and financial ruin in the 80s and 90s with the help of Disney president Frank Wells, bringing about the Disney Renaissance, revitalizing old assets and creating and acquiring new ones. However, after Wells' tragic death, Eisner let the Walt Disney Company slip into a similar situation to the one in which he found it, with Eisner having to fend off a potential Comcast acquisition. Disney was much larger, more diverse, and more poised for success than it was 2 decades prior, but it was no doubt in trouble. No better indication of Eisner's fall was his relationship with those around him, such as Roy and Gold and the endless list of executives that left the company because of him or refused to work with the company with him at the helm. So what happened that reversed
Wait, how is
Eisner's Midas
Steve Jobs
touch?
involved
It
in
was hard
this
to narrow
again?
it
I
down to
kind
one
of
event.
forgot. Did we
The
miss
death
a
of his
video?
partner, the failure of Euro Disneyland, the backlash over Disney's America, the fallout with Katzenberg and Ovitz, the failure to expand the parks, the difficulties creating programming for ABC, and the series of box office failures in the early 2000s all played a role in the downfall. Perhaps the greatest factor was not a single event, but an overall change in mindset. Eisner was a one-of-a-kind creative executive. As he told Disney War author James B. Stewart, quote, "I'm not sure you're going to see another chief executive in Hollywood like me. I think I'm probably the last of the creative types to run a company like this." Eisner constantly stressed the power of creativity, how a quality, unique product is all that is necessary to be successful. He did this early in his reign at Disney and even before when he was at Paramount, greenlighting lower-budget films with good concepts as opposed to high-budget, low-quality scripts. He continued to stress creativity even to his last days at the company, referencing his concern with Iger's lack of creative abilities numerous times before his departure. While he continued to mention the creative process and its importance, his understanding of it became twisted. In his final years at Disney, he either forgot or had difficulty implementing one of the most important aspects when producing and releasing a creative work: risk. Producing art is unpredictable and difficult. Producing an artistic experience is even more so. When it is done wrong, whether on purpose or by circumstance, it can make risk seem like the enemy and make the safe option much more attractive. But when it is done right, when the balance between financial responsibilities and creative aspirations is found, it is beautiful, memorable, special, magical, profitable, and powerful. A world devoid of such creations is bland, and an artistic landscape full of copiers and imitators is not much better. These colorful, larger-than-life experiences become part of who we are as people, and it is crucial to continue creating them, regardless of the risk. It is everything, and it all comes from one thing, that one little spark of inspiration. And despite forgetting it for a short period of his career, Eisner knew this, possibly better than anyone.
Because mediocrity is what fearful people will always settle for. Again, think of the pointless painting. One bad dot cannot ruin the painting. You fix it and you move on. However, if people are afraid to take risks with bright and bold colors, then the entire work will be very dull and very bland. If you want to discover inspired ideas, you simply have to accept that you will have to encounter more than a few that don't make the grade.
I mean, I kind of see what he's saying, but at the same time, he's taking too much risk. Like, he says, you know, oh, bright, beautiful, bold colors, take risk, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, like, he was... The Hong Kong Disneyland was, like, budget as feck. Hang on. Is it still around? Wait, hang on. Euro Disney. Is that still... Oof, it's still here. Really? Disneyland Paris is Europe's most visited tourist destination. I guess it was only initially a failure. Hang on, let me check the history. Turnaround? Euro Disney changed its name to Disneyland Paris, okay. 95 reported its first quarterly profit. 02, second name changed to Disneyland Resort Paris. I guess they managed to turn things around. If it's Europe's most visited tourist destination. 343 million in profit. Profit, not just revenue, profit. Okay, so they managed to turn things around. After Eisner. Alright, hang on. Let me check Hong Kong Disneyland. Hong Kong. Here we go. Majority owned by the Hong Kong government, managed by Disney. Yeah, I think, yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's ever gonna do as well. Did they improve the castle? I think they did. Criticisms, overcrowding. Oh yeah, that's right. They covered all that. He covered all that in the video. Okay, so eventually they turned things around, but initially, okay, at least in terms of the Disney, the Paris Disneyland, initially it was a failure. But I guess they turned things around after a long time. Oh, what video do I want to watch next? Latest. Oh wow, it really takes him a long time to do these videos, doesn't he? All right, I wanted to watch this. I've seen a bit of it. Oh, okay. I thought this was an ad.
1991, Mexico City. Entrepreneur Luis Javier Larascote starts a toy distribution company. The
Okay.
name, Amazing Toys. Not Juguetes Increíbles, Amazing Toys, in English. That's because the toys are imported from the United States. Sea monkeys, Venus flytraps, novelty stuff. Amazing. And it was, until December 1994, when the Mexican currency crisis hit. The peso was devalued by 50%, and the international novelty toy trade went down with it. Amazing Toys faced bankruptcy, and Larascote was forced to dream a different dream. If not toy distribution, perhaps toy manufacturing. Larascote had 2 children, and they loved playing with his office equipment. He bought them toy phones, but they were far more interested in the real thing. Maybe he could manufacture better toys. Or maybe he could create the real thing. Larascote approached his childhood best friend, Javier Lopez Ancona, with a new idea. Larascote and Lopez Ancona had met in the 2nd grade, and both had dreamed of working in entertainment. Larascote wanted to open his own fair, and Lopez Ancona wanted to be a magician. Both had instead found success in more traditional business ventures. Larascote at Amazing Toys, and Lopez Ancona as the director of venture capital at General Electric. But Larascote's bold concept could foray them both into the world of entertainment. Larascote described his idea as a nursery based on role-playing. He later explained, quote, "What for us may be everyday and boring reality, for children is a fantasy. I remember that I loved being taken to the bank. I saw it as something wonderful, but I couldn't reach the counters." Larascote's pitch was a unique, simulated experience with elaborate theming and complex operations. The concept would answer the need he saw in his children, the ability to take on mature responsibilities, perform grown-up tasks, and try their hand at adult professions, but on a scale accessible to them, a city where the children were in charge.
It's like, kids playing pretend, being, cops and robbers and all that.
Larascote's idea for a children's city was intriguing, but the venture came with much uncertainty. At this point in the late 1990s, themed entertainment startups aimed at regional audiences were a common sight in malls and entertainment districts. Successful concepts enjoyed a steady stream of local families, mall goers, and birthday parties. At the same time, many regional entertainment concepts went as quickly as they came, and by the turn of the millennium, the fun center fad appeared to be on its way out, with many large corporations with established brands struggling to succeed in the competitive space.
Yes.
Lares Gotti and Lopez & Kona were also at a unique disadvantage, as Mexico was still struggling to recover from the economic crisis that had destroyed amazing toys. For Lopez & Kona, this uncertainty was juxtaposed against his comfortable venture capital job, so he rejected Lares Gotti's concept of a children's role-playing city. However, Lares Gotti was insistent, and he eventually convinced his friend to enter into business with him. Lopez & Kona quit his job, and the two began planning their children's city. The initial plan called for a modest venue of 500 square meters, or around 5,000 square feet. This space would allow small groups of children to act out jobs in miniature recreations of common city structures, such as a fire station and a bank. The list of role-playing activities grew as the concept was fleshed out, and as a result, the two realized that they needed a much larger space, 6 times larger than their initial estimate. The two decided that Mexico City's Centro Santa Fe, the largest shopping mall in all of Mexico, would be the ideal site for their concept. They would lease a space of 6,000 square meters, or 20,000 square feet. This venue would allow them to build a much larger small city, with more space and opportunities for children to roleplay. As the thematic ambitions and required space grew, so did the budget. Lares Gotti and Lopez & Kona exhausted their savings investing into the project, and they eventually had to approach additional investors, including Lopez & Kona's brother Esteban. Still, this was not enough. Strapped for cash and already deep in the project, the team brainstormed a new way to raise the necessary funds. The initial plan was to brand the miniature city's businesses and public services with either generic names or none at all. The small role-playing buildings within the city would be labeled simply, such as beauty salon or pizza. However, the team recognized this as an area to raise funds. They could invite real-world companies to sponsor their equivalent businesses within the small-scale city. Lares Gotti and Lopez & Kona began knocking on doors, hoping that some business would believe in their concept and be generous enough to support them. In the end, a few businesses agreed to support the children's city, including Coca-Cola, American Airlines, Burger King, Nestle, General Motors, Domino's Pizza, Johnson & Johnson, and Walmart. 42 sponsors signed on to the unproven concept. Of the $7 million required to construct the park, 55% came from these corporate partnerships. Construction on the project was completed in the summer of 1999, and on August 19th, Lares Gotti and Lopez & Kona's Dream Park, named La Ciudad de los Niños, or the City of Children, had its inaugural ceremony.
Ta-da!
To enter the new attraction, families visiting the Santa Fe Shopping Center approached a storefront that resembled an airport terminal with official American Airlines branding. Here, guests paid their travel fare to gain entry to the City of Children. Tickets cost 90 pesos per child and 60 pesos per adult, or around $9.50 and $6 respectively. Along with their plane fare, children were given a bank check for 300 pesitos, or little pesos, the official currency of the City of Children. Families walked through security, where children were given a tracking device in the form of a wristband. This piece of technology allowed children to roam freely throughout the complex, while parents could relax with the peace of mind that their children could not leave the premises without them and could be easily found via the bracelet. The first action for kids to perform after entering the City of Children was cashing the check they were given at the gate. To do this, children needed to visit the bank, open an account, and receive an ATM card that they could use throughout their visit. From there, children began their fake lives in earnest, with two main categories of activity: spending and earning. Children could spend pesitos on activities such as General Motors bumper cars or on food such as Burger King fries. They could even drive their General Motors bumper car to the Burger King drive-thru, assuming they had enough Pemex gas to get there. Children could also spend their pesitos to take a simulated trip on an American Airlines flight or to take out a mini pizza from Domino's. To earn pesitos, kids needed to pick up a job. The City of Children offered a wide variety of employment opportunities. Some of these, such as repeller or race car driver, were standard amusement attractions, with set dressing to make them appear as jobs. Other roles were completely unique themed experiences devised just for La Ciudad de los Niños. Child firefighters dropped down a fire pole or slid down a slide when an emergency called. The mini heroes suited up, climbed onto an operating fire truck, and were driven to the scene of a fire. After arriving, it was up to the kids to put out the fake flames with real water hoses. Construction workers laid brick walls while a large concrete truck spun its mixing tank on the job site. Children could be anything from a doctor to a manicurist, a reporter to an archaeologist. Each activity was unique, engaging, and impressively themed. Each job lasted between 15 and 45 minutes and was designed for children between the ages of 4 and 13 years old. Kids could perform multiple jobs during their visit, and it was impossible to do all of the roles in a single day.
No quiero ir a la fila de mi amiga.
No, gracias. Nosotros vamos a ir a la discoteca.
Estoy hablando rápido, gordito.
While children worked on the first floor, adults could relax in a lounge above and watch over the activity of the bustling city below. Also located on the second floor was an area filled with play places and kiddie rides for children 3 and under.
Interesting
La Ciudad de
idea.
los Niños was an ambitious and risky project, but it was executed incredibly. The attraction was an immediate success, with the miniature city often hitting its capacity of 1,500 guests. In the first year,
Wait, how big
around
is this place again?
750,000 people visited the City of Children, exceeding Lariscotti and Lopez Ancona's wildest expectations. Operations would soon have to be split on certain days into 2 separate 5-hour blocks in order to manage crowds. The uniqueness of La Ciudad de los Niños gave it a distinct advantage over other regional themed entertainment centers. Since the premise of the city was to allow children to role-play adult professions, many of the activities were educational in nature. This meant that the Children's City could act as a field trip destination for nearby schools, while still attracting the typical fun center crowd of families and birthday parties. Plus, repeat visits were encouraged in the game design, as children could earn money for their ATM card and come back on a different day with money already in the bank that they had earned.
Hey, Michael, how's it going? Just got back from the grocery store. Did you pick up snacks? Yeah, just watching more Defunctland. You missed out on the episode where Eisner brought the downfall of Hong Kong Disneyland. Because yes, it's always Eisner's fault. Ah, yes, you did get snacks. Nice.
Earned from a previous visit.
Oh yeah, this video is about like a little role-playing city type thing for kids where they can pretend to be like adult professions like firefighters and like store workers and bankers and stuff.
The impressive attendance and positive reception kickstarted talks of expansion, and within months of opening, the City of Children had bold plans for their future. Lariscotti and Lopez Ancona partnered with amusement park operator Grupo Mexico to expand La Ciudad de los Niños worldwide. The partnership bred a new
You feel bad for those kids? I mean, when you're a kid, like a lot of things just feel like play, you know?
company, Kid City International, which hoped to build 200 kid cities within 5 years. The first locations considered were Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Munich, and Tokyo. The group would start by building a new location in
Alright, I'll hydrate. Give me a second.
Monterrey, which was expected to open as early as late 2000. However, it was at this point that Lariscotti and Lopez Ancona began to disagree about the future of the company. Lariscotti appeared to side with Grupo Mexico's proposal of expansion, while Lopez Ancona and his brother wanted to go in a different direction. Behind closed doors, tensions rose, and Lariscotti and Lopez Ancona decided that something needed to change with their business partnership. Unfortunately, neither wanted a cash out of La Ciudad de los Niños, and both seemed interested in expansion. In August of 2001, just 2 years after the City of Children opened, it was decided that Lariscotti would leave the company. As part of the agreement, Lariscotti would receive a payout from La Ciudad de los Niños, as well as the rights to build his own children's cities in specified territories. Lopez Ancona would retain the rights to expand La Ciudad de los Niños throughout Mexico, California, and Spain, while Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico could build the concept in Miami and parts of South America. It was also agreed that for every location that Lariscotti built, Lopez Ancona would receive 0.25% of the revenue for the first 5 years of operation. In return, Lariscotti would be given access to the existing La Ciudad de los Niños in Mexico City to showcase the concept to potential investors. With the divorce finalized, the group split,
The divorce.
each looking to conquer their respective territories and populate the Americas.
Oh yeah, drink of choice says some G Fuel that I hadn't finished from last stream. Last stream? I don't know, just some G Fuel I have. The PewDiePie flavor, which I, again, think is lingonberry.
With more kid cities. Lopez Ancona's initial plans for an expansion to Monterrey, Mexico continued, but an unexpected complication arose. In 2001, it was announced that a new theme park was to be built in Monterrey named Mundo de Adeveras, or World of Reality. The new park would be a role-playing theme park with a very similar premise to La Ciudad de los Niños, with the two main differences being its larger scale and outdoor setting. Reports speculated that Lopez Ancona was planning a plagiarism suit against Mundo de Adeveras to block it from its opening. Despite this, plans for a La Ciudad de los Niños in Monterrey continued, but it appeared that Lopez Ancona and company were prioritizing a location in the United States over everything else. Plans for a City of Children in Los Angeles and New York were put into development, despite the latter location not being specified in the parting agreement. The Los Angeles location was being planned as part of a brand new mall project, while the New York location was to lease a space in the Palisades Center shopping mall, located in Clarkstown, New York. Lopez Ancona and company pitted the two mall developers against one another, pursuing the Los Angeles location and New York location at the same time. Unfortunately, both projects ran into issues. The Los Angeles Mall project struggled during its development, and the Palisades location had to be put up to a public vote due to a covenant between the mall owners and the local community. On top of this, the Monterey location, which had its opening postponed to 2002, was delayed indefinitely. On November 5, 2002, the City of Children plan for the Palisades Center was rejected by local voters. This was due to the community's poor relationship with the mall and its owners, and the fact that the City of Children had been labeled a theme park, which many feared would bring in additional issues to the area, such as traffic. 3 days after this vote, a City of Children announced that it had received approval to move forward, but it would not be any of Lopez Ancona's. Instead, it would be Lariscotti and Grupo Mágico that would strike first, announcing that their Children's City concept would be built in South Florida, under the new name, Wanna-Do City.
Wanna-Do City? What? Wanna-Do City.
Lariscotti's new Kid City venture was to include everything that made La Ciudad de los Niños a success, but on an even grander scale.
Not
The new
Florida.
project would cost an estimated $40 million to construct, and it would be more than double the size of the original City of Children. Wanna-Do City would be located just outside of Miami in Sunrise, Florida. Lariscotti and Grupo Mágico would lease a large space in the Sawgrass Mills shopping mall. The space was previously the home decor superstore Wakama's Home Place. Wanna-Do City would be the size of 3 football fields, around 140,000 square feet. Sawgrass Mills was one of the largest shopping centers in the United States and a well-established tourist destination. The mall was the second largest in the country in terms of shopping traffic. The Mills Corporation, the owner and operator of Sawgrass Mills, would also invest in the Wanna-Do project, believing that the concept would cement Sawgrass Mills as South Florida's premier tourist attraction, as well as encourage children's retailers to lease space in the mall. Lariscotti hoped to sign as many as 70 corporate sponsors to brand the various city buildings around Wanna-Do City, as had been done at La Ciudad de los Niños, estimating that each sponsorship would be worth around $250,000. The concept art for Wanna-Do City showcased its many similarities to La Ciudad de los Niños, including the entrance theme to a plane terminal, with a real out-of-commission DC-9 being brought into Wanna-Do City to serve as the park's icon.
They actually
Although many
got,
parts
like,
of the concept appeared
plane
identical to the
or
original City of Children,
plane
Wanna-Do
portion.
City's expansive scale promised several original and ambitious experiences. Concept art showcased a second entrance, in which families could travel to the city via a large cruise ship. Initial reports also touted more role-playing areas than La Ciudad de los Niños, with over 60 venues, as well as additional careers for children to try out, as many as 250. Lariscotti and Grupo Mágico had high hopes for the project, hoping that between 800,000 and 1 million guests would enter Wanna-Do City annually. This estimate was based primarily on the success that La Ciudad de los Niños was experiencing. Wanna-Do would focus its attractions on children ages 4 through 12, and would charge between $15 and $30 for children and around $10 for adults. Construction would begin in 2003, with opening targeted for early 2004. During initial announcements, Lariscotti and Grupo Mágico made it clear that the Florida location would be just the beginning of the Wanna-Do franchise, with a second location already under development in the Mills Corporation's new shopping mall, the Meadowlands Xanadu complex in New Jersey, which was set to break
New
ground
Jersey,
in
of all
2004.
places.
After this, Wanna-Do City would expand further, with Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, and Toronto all under consideration for the new locations. Within weeks of Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico's announcement of Wanadu City,
$15,
Lopez and
but
Kona
remember,
contacted
this is
Lariscotti, informing him of
20
Wanadu
years
City's
ago?
possible intellectual property infringement. It is unclear what these initial concerns were, or how Lariscotti and Wanadu City violated the terms of the La Ciudad de los Niños parting agreement. But within just a few months, Lopez and Kona filed a lawsuit against his former business partner and friend, as well as Grupo Mexico. Lopez and Kona and Company reportedly demanded $6 million from Lariscotti and his investors, which was swiftly denied. The Wanadu City Group offered to advance Lopez and Kona's 0.25% of Wanadu's revenue over the first 5 years of operation, which they would calculate based on their projections, but Lopez and Kona rejected this offer. Deliberation was held in May of 2003, as Wanadu City was well under construction. At one point, it was reported that Grupo Mexico had offered Lopez and Kona and Company $2 million and an additional $1 million for each of the first 8 Wanadu cities that Grupo Mexico would open, for a maximum potential settlement amount of $10 million. However, this proposal was also rejected, and the lawsuits continued. In early 2004, Wanadu City delayed its original April opening to July. With construction almost complete and employee training already underway, Lopez and Kona and Company filed another suit against the project, this time in Fort Lauderdale Federal Court, in an attempt to block the opening of Wanadu City. The opening was delayed once more, now slated for August. Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico refused to allow Lopez and Kona to prevent Wanadu City from opening. Fortunately for Lariscotti, the court denied the immediate request to block the park's operation. With several lawsuits still pending and no settlement reached, Wanadu City officially opened its doors on August 13, 2004, and handed over city operations to the children of South Florida.
Oh boy. Good luck to... Oh no, go away. You get no ad time
Take
here.
all new Wanadu City, the very first Wanadu City in America. We train them, we gear them up, then they do the coolest jobs.
No, it wasn't that early. It wasn't that early. It was more like 2000.
The world.
Wanadu City claimed to be the first indoor role-playing theme park in the United States, with advertising encouraging visitors to tap into, quote, your child's inner adult. While the majority of those visiting Wanadu City were greeted with an experience unlike any other, those familiar with La Ciudad de los Niños would notice even more similarities than originally advertised. Wanadu City used almost identical role-playing experiences, thematic elements, and game design. The city featured a similar adult lounge on the second floor in the same watchtower configuration, with Wanadu City's being dubbed the Eagle's Nest. The city even used the same wristband security technology of La Ciudad de los Niños to ensure a safe experience for parents and kids. As promised, the expansive space allowed for additional venues of a larger scale, such as a big top circus and ancient ruins. These massive areas resulted in a capacity nearly double that of the original City of Children, with 2,700 kids able to visit Wanadu City at one time. To handle these crowds, 400 employees were hired to operate the city. The original promise of over 250 unique job experiences was reduced to just over 100 when the park opened. Many of these jobs shared the same venues and worked closely with other positions. Wanadu jobs included firefighter, police officer, lawyer, jury member, journalist, newspaper editor, airplane pilot, chef, baker, pizzeria employee, dentist, anesthesiologist, surgeon, emergency medical technician, pathologist, maternity ward nurse, musician, manicurist, hairstylist, fashion photographer, runway model, interior decorator, theater actor, theater director, film actor, film director, radio station host, DJ, television news anchor, clown, juggler, crime scene investigator, bail bondsman,
Jesus Christ.
librarian, archaeologist, rock climber, miner, jeweler, nightclub manager, and grocery store clerk. As with La Ciudad de los Niños,
Wow,
the
that's a
citizens of
lot of
Wanadu
different
City,
jobs.
known as citizens, would be handed their first check when they entered, which was worth 150 units of the city's unique currency, known as wongas. Citizens could earn wongas by performing jobs and spend wongas on activities around the city. Children could buy a ticket to the circus or a theater show, cookies from the bakery, a manicure, a pedicure, a hairstyling, or a rock climbing experience. Wanadu City also had multiple items that could be bought, not with wongas, but real US dollars. With the parents' approval and money, kids working at the television news station could take home a DVD of themselves on the air for $10 real. Children working in the maternity ward could pay to adopt a baby doll to take home with them. Some jobs also cost real money to perform, such as the pizzeria employee, which parents would need to pay for beforehand so that their child could eat the pizza at the end of the activity. Wanadu City had a similar continuity to La Ciudad de los Niños, with certain jobs intersecting with one another. For instance, a child buying a ticket to the theater would see a show with the group of children that at that point in the day were role-playing as actors. Despite these few synergetic elements, the activities in Wanadu City were mostly isolated, and the progression of events would reset multiple times throughout the day. Wanadu City also featured event space for birthdays and other party groups. Lariscotti and the developers worked with local educators to meet state educational standards, so that the complex could act as a field trip destination, with special discounts given to school groups.
To investigate a story, put it on paper and see it printed out can never match an assignment in a classroom.
Wanadu City even opened up at night for adults-only events such as corporate parties, so that they could get drunk and pretend to be giants. Attendance at Wanadu City was strong right out of the gate. The experience appeared to be as big of a hit as La Ciudad de los Niños, with the potential to grow into something even bigger.
For once, it's going well, and it's because Eisner isn't here. For once, you can't blame Eisner. Thankfully.
Plans for the Wanadu City expansion were put into motion after opening, with Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico hoping for 9 additional locations. However, the multiple lawsuits from Lopez and Kona threatened to slow these ambitions. By this point, the exact allegations of the lawsuit were more clear, as were Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico's defenses. Lopez and Kona claimed that Lariscotti had stolen La Ciudad de los Niños' intellectual property rights. Lariscotti maintained that the parting agreement gave him the rights to the concept in the agreed-upon territories. Lopez and Kona and company asserted that the parting agreement only allowed Lariscotti to build a child role-playing theme park, and that he and Grupo Mexico had not been given the rights to the exact architectural plans and gameplay. Furthermore, Lariscotti was claiming both in the media and to investors that he was the originator of the concept.
I came up with the idea of Wanadu City looking at my kids.
While Lariscotti had personally come up with the idea, from a legal perspective, the originator of the concept and the owner of the intellectual property was La Ciudad de los Niños, and by extension, Lopez and Kona and his investors. At one point during the discussions, Grupo Mexico offered to buy the concept and the original La Ciudad de los Niños from Lopez and Kona, with Lopez and Kona setting the price at $27 million. Apparently, this number differed so greatly from the evaluation at the time of Lariscotti's payout that Lariscotti believed there to be a case of accounting fraud, launching a criminal complaint against La Ciudad de los Niños. As Wanadu was under construction and neared opening, Lariscotti continued to claim that he was the originator of the concept, further fueling the lawsuit against him. Lopez and Kona also claimed that the section of the parting agreement that allowed Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico to build a new location had lapsed. Lariscotti added a new defense, at least in the press, that no one could own the copyright of children pretending to do adult jobs because this was a universal experience of childhood. However, Lopez and Kona and company were insistent that they were the legal originators of the concept, and decided to pursue a lawsuit against the Mills Corporation as well for leasing space to and investing in a venue that they saw as an infringement on their intellectual property. Then, Lariscotti added an additional defense, that the concept of children's role-playing was not only not unique, but that there were already 120 similar venues to La Ciudad de los Niños and Wanadu City in existence.
Wait, what? It's not the first kid.
Since the relatively recent invention of childhood, role-playing
Remember to trademark, copyright, patent your ideas. So it would seem. Copyright everything.
has been a favorite activity of the youth. In the early 20th century, children would often act out fantasies of their very gendered futures, with boys playing with toys resembling trains and farming equipment, and girls nursing baby dolls to sharpen their maternal instincts. This was a common experience among American children, mainly those born after the 1920s. As before this, children were often too busy working their real jobs to fantasize about working fake ones. Once it was a common idea in the US that children were innocent beings in need of protection, and not just tiny adults whose hands can reach that part of the machine that I can't, venues were constructed specifically for their enjoyment. Amusement parks, originally designed for local perverts, drunks, and picnickers, were transitioning to attractions made exclusively for children, relegating parents to park benches to merely observe their children's joy. As Kiddylands and similar children's amusement parks sprout up, so did alternative entertainment and educational centers designed for little ones. In 1899, the Brooklyn Children's Museum opened, offering unique exhibits tailor-made for children to interact with. This concept slowly spread throughout the United States during the 20th century, and by 1975, 38 children's museums had opened across the country. These concepts originally focused on science and local history, but eventually, economic exhibits allowed children to role-play various jobs in small mock-ups of consumer spaces, such as banks or grocery stores. By 2004, when Wanadu City opened, the number of children's museums had grown to 220, with an additional 80 planned or under construction. Children's science museums were not the only source of educational role-playing for kids. In 1930, an Ohio-based children's writer named Mildred Roberts wrote a book called Safety Town Stories, intended to help children navigate the new and dangerous world of automobiles. A Mansfield, Ohio police officer named Friend C. Bowles was inspired to take the lessons found in Roberts' book and put them into practice. Bowles created a program in which children could role-play various traffic scenarios to learn the best practices for both drivers and pedestrians. Using pedal cars and bikes, children steered around mock roadways and simple building sets that composed Bowles' Safety Town. The initial program was transient and moved from school to school in the nearby area, but its effectiveness and popularity in Ohio resulted in the concept being adapted in other states, many with permanent and elaborate safety towns that school groups would travel to visit. According to the National Safety Town Center, by 2019, 3,500 safety towns existed in 23 different countries around the world.
We learned about looking left and right before we cross the street so you don't die.
While children's science museums and safety towns were primarily designed for younger elementary school children, similar concepts with more complexity were created for a slightly older crowd. In January of 1981, a new educational center opened in Kansas City, under the name Exchange City. Exchange City was an ambitious new teaching tool that allowed children to spend a day role-playing in a miniature city in order to learn the basic principles of commerce. The children's visit was preceded by a 4-week curriculum designed to teach the basic principles of economics and prepare kids for their visit to Exchange City. The scale of the town was much smaller than the indoor Kid City theme parks that would be built decades later. Exchange City encompassed a mere 8,500 square feet and was built with a $100,000 grant from Hallmark Cards. Local businesses would donate a combined $140,000 annually to cover operational costs. For maximum irony, the city designed to prepare children for economic success was built inside of an abandoned warehouse in downtown Kansas City. Exchange City was specifically designed for 5th graders. Founder and executive director Janice Creamer said that the experience was designed for this age group because, quote, "This is the time when many youngsters get their first jobs babysitting, shoveling snow, or mowing lawns." In Exchange City and with its accompanying curriculum, children would learn simple economic concepts such as supply and demand, as well as run mock elections to determine Exchange City's government officials, including mayor. Depending on the school, the election campaigns leading up to the Exchange City visit could be extensive, with children creating campaign posters and placing them throughout the hallways of their elementary school. This also served to excite the younger children, building their anticipation for the 5th grade and their trip to Exchange City. However, this was not true for every child, as despite seeing these posters for my entire elementary school experience, the year I was in 5th grade, my school did not go to Exchange City for some reason, despite going every year prior, which means that I was not able to run for mayor, despite the fact that I had been preparing my campaign and policy since the age of 5 years old.
Oh, he's bitter. Oh, he's so bitter about this. He wanted to go, but he never got the chance. Oh man, the one year he would have gone, they decided not to. Oh, poor guy. He just wanted to be mayor.
Exchange City's daily operation was fully continuous. While there were around 90 jobs that children could perform, students would only hold a single job for the entire day, and all activities affected one another. Professions included bank president, postmaster, waitress, journalist, arcade owner, factory worker, and radio DJ. But Exchange City's gameplay focused primarily on the role of business owner. When these tiny entrepreneurs arrived to the city, rather than being handed a set amount of money in Exchange City's unique currency, Business owners would need to take out a loan to receive their starting funds. They were then sent to a miniature warehouse, which was stocked full of materials with which they could start their business. Materials included games, posters, jewelry, lemonade, and popcorn. Business owners had to pay their loan back with interest by the end of the day, and they also had to pay taxes on their income. If they wanted to advertise their business, they had to purchase commercial airtime from Exchange City's radio. Citizens spent their time off work using their funds to purchase products from business owners, and they could also pay for song dedications on the local radio.
And how much money do you make? $4.50. And how much have you spent of it? $5.50.
In some versions of the gameplay, business owners were given the option to purchase insurance, and throughout the day, fake emergencies would strike Exchange City's businesses. Owners that had purchased the insurance would need to file a claim, while those that declined coverage were absolutely screwed. At the end of the day, the citizens debriefed with the educators on their experience and the economic lessons that they learned. When school was out during the summer, Exchange City ran a one-week camp for students to extend their role-playing over several days. In the mid-1980s, Florida Superintendent Howard Hinesley visited Kansas City and observed Exchange City, recognizing the value in the concept and hoping to build a similar program for his own school district. After convincing local entrepreneur Gus Stravos to invest in the project, Enterprise Village was constructed for the children of the Tampa Bay area, opening in 1990. That same year, another educational center resembling Exchange City opened in Denver, named Young Ameritown. In 1998, Enterprise Village was expanded to include Finance Park, a similar but slightly more mature version of the concept for middle schoolers. This simulator was more complex and focused more on family budgeting than career role-playing. Children would be given a set of circumstances with which they would have to develop a budget, including deciding which house to purchase and what kind of car to buy. Throughout the day, children would be given a life circumstance card, referred to as a bad luck card, that would impact their financial outlook and force them to re-budget. Bad luck events in Finance Park and equivalent family budgeting curriculums included sudden unemployment, a car breaking down, a water heater leaking, the sudden death of a relative, the sudden hospitalization of a relative, a bridge collapsing causing the sudden death of several relatives, an unexpected child, imprisonment due to public intoxication, and a terrorist attack. The year after Finance Park opened, Junior Achievement, a nonprofit specializing in children's financial education, approached both Exchange City and Enterprise Village about the prospect of expanding their operations into a franchise of locations. Throughout the early 2000s, Junior Achievement would construct and operate 20 additional Exchange Cities throughout the United States, and they would also expand the Finance Park curriculum to middle schoolers across the country. During this period, additional educational role-playing centers and children's...
I'm just baffled. Like, growing up, I have never, ever heard of any, like, places like this. And any like, role-playing, any kid cities, any role-playing areas like this. Growing up, I have never, ever heard of any of them. Like, not on TV, not through the schools or anything like that. Just, nope. Nothing. I'm like, it seems these places were rather popular, but how have I never heard of it?
Museums were being constructed, and by the time Wanadu City opened in 2004, kid cities were already a cornerstone of American childhood. However, since the space was not dominated by a singular national chain, most children in the United States were unaware of how common the formative kid city visit was to their generation.
Oh.
The presence of children's museums, safety towns, and educational kid cities seemed to bolster Wanadu City's defense against the lawsuits brought about by Lopez and Kona and company. Despite the heavily publicized conflict, it is unclear exactly when and how a resolution was reached. Reports indicate that sometime shortly after Wanadu City's opening in August of 2004, the two parties reached a settlement in which Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico agreed to pay an undisclosed amount of money to Lopez and Kona and company to drop the suits. The only other reported condition was that Lariscotti could not open any Wanadu City locations in Mexico. Just a few weeks after opening, Wanadu City announced their plans to open their first international location in Japan. They also reiterated their intention to build a second U.S. location with the Mills Corporation within their new Xanadu Meadowlands complex in New Jersey. This ambitious $2 billion mall project would include a 30-story Ferris wheel, an indoor ski slope, and a thrilling roller coaster. The Xanadu Meadowlands broke ground just 6 weeks after Wanadu City opened. Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico hoped for 10 wanna-do locations, and their collaboration with the Mills Corporation was key to this expansion. Rene Aziz, CEO of Wanna Do Entertainment, said, quote, "We expect to grow with the Mills Corp." 2 additional Wanna Do cities were planned, one for the existing Gurney Mills Shopping Center in Gurney, Illinois, and another for Mills Block 37 project, which was under development in downtown Chicago. Lopez Ancona was skeptical of Wanna Do City's future. According to Forbes magazine, Lopez Ancona expressed his belief that Wanna Do City was too big, pointing out that the park was nearly 3 times the size of the original City of Children, despite being located in an area with a much smaller population. He also made it clear that he was still in the process of expanding La Ciudad de los Niños to the United States, but he seemed to be far behind Lariscotti and Grupo Mexico. Complicating expansion further, Mundo de Adaveras, the outdoor children's city that was dubbed a knockoff of La Ciudad de los Niños, opened in early 2005. This $25 million park offered similar attractions, but on a scale that only an outdoor space could allow, with operable excavators, drivable streets, and a sheep dressed like an astronaut hanging out with a water droplet wearing a cowboy hat. Contrary to initial reports, Lopez Ancona and company did not sue Mundo de Adaveras over the park's similarities to the City of Children, and the group continued to pursue their Monterrey expansion plans despite the presence of the similar park. The success of both of these expansions would be largely determined by the reaction of those visiting, and as the prevalence of kid cities grew throughout the 2000s, more children, parents, and educators were able to judge the value of spending a day in a miniature metropolis.
I'm still baffled
The reviews
how I
from the
haven't heard
citizens of La
these
Ciudad de
before.
los Niños and Wanna Do City were overwhelmingly positive. 6-year-old Yvette Sierra, while employed as a grocery store clerk at the City of Children's grocery store, exclaimed, quote, "I love working here. It's fun." This response was expected for a venue primarily designed for entertainment. However, the reviews of the junior capitalists of Exchange City, yes, that's what they called them, were more mixed. At their core, the City of Children and Wanna Do City were indoor theme parks with educational components, while Exchange City, Enterprise Village, and the other financial role-playing centers were more geared toward education and preparation for the real world of capital. This greatly affected the children's enjoyment and stress levels during their role-playing.
In our business, we sell business phones.
Some were able to find simple satisfaction in their jobs. 6th grade DJ Brian Burnett said, quote, "I'm just putting out things that sound good." Newspaper editor Blake Jones said, quote, "I liked working in Exchange City because it was very educational. I bought a Slinky from the sports shop." Student Jeff Davenport said, quote, "Being mayor of Exchange City was exciting. Yeah, I bet it was." Some children found their jobs stressful and the pressures of the
He's still bitter. Because he wanted to be mayor.
free market overwhelming. 10-year-old Keith Jacobs struggled with his jewelry business, lamenting, quote, "Business is pretty lousy. We're lowering prices, and I guess we're going to have to do some advertising on the radio. I'm worried about the bank loan." Others proved to be surprisingly good at the gameplay. 10-year-old Todd Flager's t-shirt business was so successful that he was raising the price of t-shirts while kids were in line to buy them. In Enterprise Village, 11-year-old Stephen Mala hosted the Home Shopping Network, where he proved to be a natural-born salesman. Mala hawked his products, raving, quote, "These little cards are great, simply great. You want these. You do. You need these cards. There are only 2 left. Send them to your mom. They can be used for any occasion. And for all you girls out there, we have keychains with pictures of men in them. These men are handsome and they are in our keychains. Men. Or you could put your boyfriend's picture in there. Whatever. Either way, they're only $1.50. When a Florida Today reporter asked Mala what he would be when he grew up, he responded, incorrectly, baseball player. The cutthroat nature of these economy simulators was encouraged by the teachers and program staff. One of Exchange City's program directors, Ellen Pittman, explained, quote, "It's sink or swim. Some of the kids make a profit and can repay the bank loan with which they start the day. Other kids go broke."
You got a busy job.
Yeah.
Are you having fun?
The post office got shut down because
You
no
got
one
a
was
busy
in here
job.
working.
Are
Yeah.
you having fun?
Business good?
Yeah, business is good so far. We sold to one person so far.
He's having fun. A Kansas City Times report on the summer camp version of Exchange City reported that on one of the days of the week-long camp, students were required to eat their bagged lunch inside of Exchange City, but were not allowed to bring drinks. An Exchange City director explained that as a result, quote, thirsty consumers will pay premium prices in the Exchange City snack shop.
And do you like working? No, it's a mess.
Elementary school
It's a
principal
mess.
Mark Grant said that the most important lesson that his children learned was the drudgery of mundane work, adding, quote, they all want to be managers. 11-year-old Jason of Enterprise Village agreed, saying that someday he hoped to own his own McDonald's because, quote, it seems fun. You can check up on your workers and see if they're doing a good job. Staring down the barrel of monotony and being confronted with a future of mundane labor was an experience that some children had at the fun-oriented Wanadu City. 9-year-old Malcolm, who was employed at a public supermarket, was interviewed while stocking shelves. He explained that he wanted to be a soccer player, but, quote, if it doesn't work out, then I'll probably have to work in a supermarket. He also said, quote, it's nice to have a lot of money. I feel rich. I'm not putting anything in the bank. I want to feel the money in my pocket. At Finance Park, middle schoolers were faced with an even harsher reality as they planned their budget. Reporter Adam Hughes overheard one interaction between a real adult and a child role-playing as an adult, when the real adult scolded the child, quote, Mallory, you have such a boring life on paper. Do something. To which the 8th grader responded, quote, I can't afford to.
Students are learning to do what I pretty much do every day.
Beyond financial education, Kid Cities imparted various
You have
other
such a
lessons
boring
in
life on
careers and
paper,
civil
do
service.
something I can't
Wanadu City's
afford
hospital
to.
was elaborate and realistic.
That is like the most real statement I've ever heard. It's like, do something I can't afford to. Damn. That kid was feeling it.
And the surgery performed in Wanadu's OR was shockingly graphic. Many children reported being grossed out by the task of slicing open the fake human body. And the images of the children doing this are as repulsing as they are adorable. These children are operating on a dummy, but if you are sensitive to imagery of bloody lacerations, I would recommend skipping to this time code STAT. Okay, here we go. Reporter Peter Hosley observed birthday girl Bianca and her friends attempting to remove a kidney stone that was ailing a fake patient. To do this, they needed to make a small incision in the skin near the kidney. The girls scrubbed up and prepared to perform the surgery, but soon after slicing into the skin, one of Bianca's party guests became sickened by the sight and had to leave the tiny OR. Bianca simply shook her head in annoyed disappointment, quietly concluding, quote, she'll never become a doctor, before continuing on with the surgery.
I didn't think that the actual detail of what I see on a daily basis could be found in an environment like this.
The Wanadu City EMTs had to respond to fake emergencies, with one of the children playing the part of an injured kidison in need of help. The EMTs would find the child, move them onto a gurney, and then push them into a tiny ambulance. There were also plenty of options for children wanting to participate in the justice system. The Kid Cities did an excellent job of taking the playground game of cops and robbers and augmenting it into a complex experience that occurred throughout the city's streets. There was some effort made to reduce the typical stakes that come with real-world law and order. For instance, the courts in Wanadu City would typically take on imaginary cases based on fairy tales, such as should Goldilocks go to jail? However, depending on the staff, Wanadu City and La Ciudad de los Niños would sometimes have the courts prosecute child criminals who had been arrested by the child police. One report read, quote, this place is not free of troublemakers and disputes, which is why there is a children's prison, and it holds little ones who try to abuse or fight with each other. The most common crimes in Kid Cities were running, spitting, littering, and cursing, but other cited infractions were more intense. Due to the high-pressure nature of Exchange City's business operations, children found it rewarding to write bad checks, which would inevitably bounce when a child bank teller discovered the scheme. Program director Ellen Pittman recounted, quote, we had 2 kids go in and rob the bank last week. That really stirred things up. Some children were more extreme in their law enforcement role-playing. At both the City of Children and Wanadu City, children could make up any excuse to imprison another child, as the bars of the cells were made of rubber and were fun to escape from. Some of the false narratives created to justify their arrests were alarming to say the least. 10-year-old cop Jorge tackled 11-year-old Luna, taking a shot at his jaw before placing him under arrest for possession, explaining to a nearby AP reporter, quote, I found on him. Plus, he resisted arrest. Some detainees were less innocent. During one exciting day in Wanadu City, kid criminals reportedly broke into the maternity ward and began kidnapping babies. Some children working in Exchange City's law enforcement found the power of their position intoxicating, believing that their assigned profession should come with a limitless, unwavering respect and admiration from their fellow citizens. This belief was systematically supported throughout the justice system. One student judge snapped at a citizen that was talking back to a police officer, threatening them with additional fines, saying, quote, "If you want to argue, you can have another one." If the accused did make it into mock court, they often got off scot-free thanks to a brilliant defense counsel. At Wanadu City, a journal was kept in which all of the child lawyers wrote about their experiences and passed advice to future attorneys. A Wanadu City visitor recalled reading a takeaway from one of the former lawyers who claimed to have cracked the code to the courtroom, writing in the journal, quote, "This job is so easy, all you say is, can you prove it?"
Can you prove it, lol?
Wanadu City seemed to be off to a fantastic
They're just
start.
like real
the
cops.
lawsuits were gone, the reviews were positive, and the attendance was great. Unfortunately, this streak of success was short-lived. Just over a year after opening, in October of 2005, Hurricane Wilma made landfall in Florida, causing major destruction throughout the Miami metropolitan area. The southern Florida tourism market was severely impacted by the storm, and Sawgrass Mills saw a decrease in visitors over multiple weeks. On top of this, the disruption forced many local schools to cancel their field trips to Wanadu City. Representatives for Wanadu Entertainment claimed that the storm resulted in a huge financial hit and the loss of nearly 6 weeks' worth of revenue. Coincidentally, around this same time, the Securities and Exchange Commission began investigating the Mills Corporation for accounting errors. The probe uncovered that the company's annual profit was $200 million less than initially reported. In 2006, the Xanadu Mall development was sold to Colony Capital, and just a few months after this, Mills was on the verge of bankruptcy. The Simon Property Group and Farallon Capital Management would purchase the corporation for $1.64 billion. The Mills Corporation was dead, and with it, Wanadu City's primary partner in expansion. Wanadu Entertainment was not giving up on opening additional cities, but the lack of assistance from the Mills Corporation was just the beginning of the setbacks. Just over a year after opening, it was uncovered that Wanadu City was not meeting its attendance projections. Laris Gotti and Grupo Mexico had hoped for between 800,000 to 1 million guests per year, with a resulting $30 million in expected revenue. While throughout 2005, claims were made that Wanadu had achieved or even surpassed these targets, in 2006, reports revealed that these goals were far from met. As a result, Wanadu City fell behind on tax payments, and after being threatened with an account freeze from the Department of Revenue, Wanadu Entertainment paid the $200,000 in missing taxes. Additionally, 3 vendors would bring a lawsuit against Wanadu City, claiming they were not paid for their services. In spite of this, Wanadu Entertainment was adamant that expansion was imminent, but this opinion was not shared throughout the entire organization. Rodrigo Gonzalez, vice chairman of Grupo Mexico's parent company, CIE, clarified that expansion plans would not move forward until the company was, quote, completely comfortable with the level of performance of the unit that we have opened. Gonzalez also expressed the belief that the existing Wanadu City was too big, claiming that it was, quote, larger than the attendance it currently supports. In an attempt to right the course, Wanadu City brought in a consulting firm to suggest operational changes. The most common feedback that they received was from parents, who felt that it was odd that they had to pay admission to the park since they could not participate in any of the activities. Anat Moyal, a parent visiting Wanadu City, told the South Florida Sun Sentinel, quote, "It's truly ridiculous to pay for a parent just to sit here, and you cannot leave your kid to go shopping. They're not a babysitter." Adding, "It's not Disney World. You're here for 3 or 4 hours, not all day. There are limited activities. There are no shows. At Disney, they're putting a lot of money into entertainment for the adults too." Parents also felt that the ticket prices for children were too high. As a result of the feedback, Wanadu City stopped charging admission for parents and discounted admission for children, with prices dropping to as low as $20. While this change would address the common criticism, charging less would result in a loss of revenue. To offset this, Wanadu's Wannafinder security bracelet system became a premium $2 add-on. For a $6 upcharge, parents could receive a short massage in a spa while their children worked in the city. To save on costs, Wanadu City closed on Mondays and Tuesdays during the school year. While Wanadu City was addressing its issues, Lopez & Kona and Company were moving forward with their expansion. In 2006, the second City of Children finally opened in Monterrey, Mexico, under the new brand Kidzania. The name would allow for a recognizable brand that could expand far beyond Mexico, and a new backstory was created to explain the formation of Kid Cities. The story reads that children felt that, quote, governments operated inefficiently, societies were becoming inequitable, valuable resources were routinely squandered, and values were seemingly more and more negotiable.
Too much already. Something had to be done, and kids would be the ones to do it.
As a result, the children created Kidzania, which the story claims roughly translates to Land of Cool Kids. Just a few months after the second city opened, the first international location, and the first to be franchised, would open in Japan as Kidzania Tokyo. The new Kidzania brand was immediately effective, and the franchise model proved to be a successful expansion strategy, with another location in Indonesia, named Kidzania Jakarta, opening in November of 2007. Plans for additional Kidzania locations were swiftly put into motion, with interest shown in markets all around the world. While Kidzania was on the rise, Wanadu City remained stagnant. Even after operational changes, Wanadu City was struggling, and they were experiencing a consistent obstacle that Kidzania was not.
Corporate sponsors.
The elementary school explanation of economics is that in order to succeed, a business needs to sell their products for more than they cost to produce. However, in the complex economy of the real world, there are many businesses that are able to profit even with a lack of direct revenue from their customer base. The most common method to do this is through advertising, especially with businesses that require significant startup costs. For example, if the cost of constructing and operating a new baseball stadium was entirely put on the spectators, then the ticket price would likely be higher than most are willing to pay, which would in turn result in less revenue as most fans would decide to not attend. Pricing tickets in a range that fans were comfortable with would result in stronger attendance, but the reduced price might not be enough to cover the stadium's construction costs in a reasonable time frame. So to make up for this gap in revenue, the organization turns to other companies, signing multi-million-dollar contracts for advertising on physical and digital signs throughout the stadium, on the players' jerseys, and the most expensive, the naming rights to the stadium itself. Offsetting costs with advertising is a common practice in many businesses, especially those in which the product requires attendance and/or attention. When these savings are passed along to the consumer, some services such as newspapers, cable television, and streaming services are sold at a significant discount thanks to the advertising contained within. Some services are even free thanks to advertising, such as radio, broadcast television, and YouTube videos. Advertising has long been a way to offset the high cost of constructing a theme park. Disney relied heavily on advertising to construct Disneyland in the mid-1950s, and only became more reliant on them in the following decades. Recently, the Disney parks have required less advertising revenue, as they have found that a large portion of their customer base is willing to pay for tickets at a high enough price to offset most costs. This is not normal, and many themed entertainment venues are dependent on income from advertisers to continue operating. The benefit of the advertising revenue to the business is obvious, but what is the benefit to the advertiser? In the case of a baseball stadium, the advertising can increase brand awareness and recognition, while also creating a positive association between their brand and the sports team, psychologically implying to potential customers that the brand is part of the team. In the case of Disney parks, sponsored attractions also increase brand awareness and recognition, and since most often the theme of the attraction relates to the brand's business activity, a positive association is formed. For example, AT&T was once the sponsor of Epcot Center's Spaceship Earth, a ride about the history and future of communication. Therefore, the sponsorship psychologically cues riders to think about AT&T when they think about communication and the future. In family entertainment venues, the advertising is primarily directed at the adults of the group, as they are the ones with the money and the power to purchase the product. Children's advertising is a huge industry, but the products are mostly limited to things that children want to consume, such as foods, toys, and entertainment. When United Technologies agreed to sponsor the Living Seas at Epcot Center, one would assume that they saw revenue potential from the adults in the crowd, and they were not performing some long-game psyop on 8-year-olds hoping that the positive association would stick and in 30 to 40 years they would choose the Otis Elevator Company as their building's escalator provider. But what about an entertainment venue that is designed solely for kids, in which the adults are sent to a boring lounge to read a book while their children experience the product and its advertisers alone?
I'll hydrate.
What would the motive for the advertisers be in that scenario? As proved during the development of La Ciudad de los Niños, megacorporations have a consistent, almost suspicious enthusiasm for funding Kid City projects. The original sponsors of the City of Children were some of the largest companies in the world. These partnerships were, in part, a result of Lopez Ancona's business contacts from his time in finance. But even with this advantage, major corporations clearly saw something in Kid Cities worth investing in. At the time of its construction, it was reported that Wanadu City had a harder time securing sponsors than the City of Children had, and as a result, the project relied on many regional partnerships relevant to Florida, such as Plantation General Hospital, the Miami Herald, and Publix grocery stores. However, Wanadu City still received money from a few well-known brands, such as State Farm Insurance, Cartoon Network, Spirit Airlines, CNN, and Johnny Rockets. Soon after opening, Coca-Cola was added to the lineup, sponsoring a bottling factory and a drink delivery vehicle. Exchange City and Enterprise Village were smaller venues, designed primarily for education and built for a fraction of the cost. And yet, they still had sponsorships from major corporations. Enterprise Village had a McDonald's where kids could actually serve food. When Finance Park was being developed years later, brands such as AutoNation and Outback Steakhouse were so emphatic about being part of the project that a waiting list was created for the potential sponsors.
A waiting
Children's
list for
museums,
sponsors?
which were even smaller in
Damn.
scope and directed at children younger in age, also have partnerships from corporations such as Bank of America and Wells Fargo. There are a few innocuous reasons as for why these Fortune 500 companies would give money to these unproven small-scale regional theme centers. For one, these corporations could simply be investing in these communities and in their children's futures. Another reason for these corporations' involvement was simply realism. When developing Wanadu City, Lariscotti pointed out that, quote, a city without corporate names doesn't look like a real city.
He's
Anna
not wrong.
Martinez, a mom visiting Wanadu City with her son, agreed, explaining, quote, it's reality, what they're familiar with, what they're comfortable with. These justifications did not stop critics from voicing their opinions on the product placement. Speaking on Wanadu City, Harvard psychologist Susan Lin argued that, quote, it's one more step that corporations are taking to insinuate themselves into the fabric of our lives. University of Florida professor Paul George critiqued Enterprise Village's sponsorship model, saying, quote, I'm not convinced that reading, writing, and retailing are the 3 R's. Further assessing that, quote, it sounds to me like a giant commercial aimed at students who have no choice and who are incredibly impressionable. I feel like I'm constantly having to protect my own children from avaricious retailers as it is. The idea that we're going to install them in the curriculum and make it mandatory is just mind-boggling. Incredibly, the advertiser's stated motivation sided more with the perspective of these critics, as one could argue that some seemed a bit too excited about the collaboration. When State Farm was initially contacted about a partnership, representatives of Wanadu Entertainment proposed that the insurance company could sponsor the city's tiny fire department, as State Farm was well known for selling fire insurance policies. However, upon hearing that Wanadu City had a bank, State Farm asked if they could sponsor this venue instead. State Farm sponsorship manager Bobby Wilkinson explained, quote, a lot of people don't know about State Farm's bank. That's what made Wanadu a great marketing opportunity. How awesome to have a 3 or 4-year-old with their first bank account and debit card from State Farm. We can introduce that brand early to kids and bring some awareness to parents that we have a State Farm bank. And if we can introduce this brand early to these kids, then the potential that these could be lifelong customers just increases. Lariscotti agreed, claiming Wanadu employed, quote, quality advertising rather than quantity advertising. It leaves a deep mark in very little time. The half hour the child plays with something will stay with them for their entire life. It's something they'll never forget. Adam Cadamaccio, an executive at the firm hired to recruit Wanadu City sponsors, explained that children would, quote, live the brand at Wanadu City, leaving a lasting impression that companies will translate into parents' dollars for them. Rich Engwall, vice president of the foundation that operated Enterprise Village and Finance Park, clarified, quote, the sponsors believe wholeheartedly in the value of public education.
Sure.
But there's no denying that when the kids walk out of here and open their first bank account, they're thinking first of Bank of America because that's where they had their first checking account.
So what can we learn from this amazing
Not
Kidsania
Spirit
concept?
Airline.
That if companies are planting a seed in consumers' minds and in kids' minds as they're very young, it's going to stay with you forever. That emotional engagement is really important to plant in our minds as we're very young.
The advertising theory was just as effective in practice. One example could be found in La Ciudad de los Niños, which featured a pastry factory sponsored by Mexican snack company Marinella. At the factory, 8-year-old Regina was learning how to create the popular gansito treat when she experienced a lucrative shift in perspective. She explained, quote, it's neat because we get to find out how gansitos are made. I always gave them away to my brothers, but maybe now I'll start to like them. Spirit Airlines hoped for a similar outcome with their Wanadu City sponsorship. Lynn Corman, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications for Spirit, hoped that the Wanadu City Flight Simulator would make, quote, all the kids think good things about Spirit. When they're sitting around home planning the family vacation, we hope everyone will be saying, we're flying Spirit, right? Despite the abject terror that is learning your child has been spirit-pilled without your consent, most parents had a more optimistic view of the kids' cities. believing that it was a good way for their children to learn financial responsibility. Moreover, many saw no difference between Kid City's sponsorship model and other children's entertainment spaces, which either featured similar brand partnerships or were directly operated by megacorporations. After all, not every children's role-playing space can be as wholesome and brandless as a safety town. Wait, is that a McDonald's? When building Wanadu City, Lariscotti employed all of the same strategies that he had with the City of Children, but the project was proving to be too ambitious given the amount of support. Unlike La Ciudad de los Niños, which had relied mostly on its sponsors to cover construction costs, Wanadu Entertainment had taken out a $10 million loan. This needed to be paid off, but operations had already found the maximum most guests were willing to pay for the experience. To close this gap, Wanadu Entertainment continued to add attractions to entice visitors and recruited more advertisers to cover costs. A veterinary clinic sponsored by animal pharmaceutical manufacturer Muriel was added. Here, children could diagnose and treat fake pets, some of which were animatronics that, quote, look so real that kids ask if they're okay when the dogs go motionless. A new experience for older children was added, which focused on work in STEM-related fields. This experience, sponsored by Motorola, allowed children to operate a virtual submarine. Nestle would join the project as well, sponsoring an elaborate Wonka factory where children could learn to be Oompa Loompas. Nestle, who also sponsored La Ciudad de los Niños, was a perfect fit for the Kids City because they have a long history of relying on children to make their chocolate.
Oh god. Is this true? What? Okay. I don't recall hearing this, but...
The new attractions and sponsorships received positive reviews and significant press. Wanadu City appeared to be making positive changes, and the future of the company seemed bright.
Seemed bright.
In late 2007, it was revealed that real adults working real jobs messed up the real economy so badly that the world entered the Great Recession. The global downturn negatively affected both real cities and miniature fake ones. Schools cut back on field trips, and families reduced their leisure spending. As a result, attendance fell at both Kid City theme parks and educational centers.
If we didn't have enough money, we would need to get stimulus.
Throughout this period, Junior Achievement was in the midst of transitioning many exchange cities into an updated version of the concept with the new branding, J.A. BizTown. While this was occurring, the recession forced many exchange cities to reduce staff and cut costs. One location in New Hampshire closed their doors due to financial difficulties. The original location in Kansas City was in the process of moving from its downtown location to the Kansas City Underground when the recession hit. Meanwhile, the recession served as another in a long list of setbacks for Wanadu City. In 2008, Lariscotti exited Wanadu Entertainment. No specific reasons were given for his departure, but by this point, Wanadu City's expansion plans had almost certainly been abandoned. Around the same time as Lariscotti's exit, Wanadu City designed an extensive overlay to boost attendance at the park. Dinosaurs were added to nearly every corner of the city, adding new experiences and a new job as a paleontologist. Multiple other professions were affected by the prehistoric invasion. The cooking had dinosaurs, the modeling had dinosaurs, the theater had dinosaurs. CNN was rebranded to the Caveman News Network. There were dinosaurs placed all throughout the city, and the city bus was rethemed to allow children to take a guided tour of the featured creatures. The following year, when most of the dinosaur theming was removed, the vehicle became a Broward County transit bus as part of a 13-month, $50,000 sponsorship with the Florida Department of Transportation. In August of 2009, the recession, along with the H1N1 influenza pandemic, resulted in Mundo de Adaveras closing its gates. The park was left abandoned, and many urban explorers have documented the park in recent years. The derelict attraction still has much of its original signage and theming. The factory is still intact, as are many of the building facades. The park is now overrun with miniature graffiti, tiny debris, and child-sized collapsing infrastructure. Mundo de Adaveras would not be the only kid city to fall post-recession, as only a year later, on November 18, 2010, it was announced that Wanadu City would close for good. Few were surprised by the news, as attendance had remained a significant issue for Wanadu City. Management had failed to properly address it, despite the addition of new attractions such as the Flavor Maker's Taste Emporium, in which children could take on the role of a taste tester and try multiple snow cone flavors, and a new show in Wanadu City's theater named Help, which was described as a psychedelic puppet show tribute to the Beatles. Meanwhile, some aspects of the Wanadu City experience had become worse. Admission was increased to $40 per child, which many parents felt was outrageous. Some believed that the experience itself had deteriorated, with some attractions closing during slow periods. When a busy day did occur, queues for the city's jobs could be long, leading many children to spend a significant portion of their day waiting. Other issues were not new. While Wanadu City had clearly learned that charging parents admission was a major deterrent to visiting families, the park was still charging a $10 entry fee for parents in 2010. Even with new sponsorships throughout its life, lack of partnerships was still cited as one of the main reasons for its closure. When contacted, a spokesperson for Wanadu City stated that the park had no statement on its closure. Wanadu City was planned to close on January 12th, but just a few weeks after this announcement, the date was moved up. Wanadu City would officially close its doors on January 2nd, 2011. 314 employees were laid off, and many of the park's props, structures, and rides were put up for auction, including the DC-9 airplane. The airplane was purchased
like for $40? Wait, how much is a ticket to Disneyland? I feel like that would cost like $40. Like I would pay $40 for Disneyland, but not this.
purchased for $20,000 by a man named Joe Axline, who planned to turn it into his house. Axline's lifelong dream was to live inside of an airplane, a dream he was finally able to achieve after the closure of Wanadu City, as well as his divorce.
Living it up.
Axline dubbed his airplane homestead Project Freedom, in a reference to his divorce. There's something poetic about the Wanadu City plane, which allowed children to live out their dreams of becoming pilots, now being used to help an adult to achieve their childhood dream of living inside of an airplane. While the closure upset many of Wanadu City's frequent visitors, a group that did not seem disappointed was the management of Sawgrass Mills, who seemed eager to fill the void that the city would leave behind. The large space used by Wanadu City would be gutted and transformed into a new shopping area, where multiple luxury retailers would set up shop. The new section, named Fashion Row, opened in 2013.
Hey, with Priceline VIP Family, you can
Nope.
Wanadu City was falling, Kidzania was rising. A second location in Japan was constructed, along with new parks in Portugal, Dubai, and South Korea, bringing the total number of Kidzania.
Oh, you actually heard about the guy living in the airplane? Still though, like, I mean, if I got a chance to live in an airplane, that'd be pretty sweet.
To 8. Luis Javier Larescotti had left both La Ciudad de los Niños and Wanadu City behind, but he could not stay away from kid cities for good. Throughout 2011, Larescotti developed a new role-playing theme center under the new brand Can Do. Can Do was significantly smaller and cheaper than Wanadu City, costing just $5 million to construct. According to Larescotti, the most notable difference between the new project and his previous ventures was that in Can Do, parents could participate in the fun. Larescotti acknowledged that the sidelining of parents and guardians was the most common complaint in both the City of Children and Wanadu City, and he believed that Can Do would find more success in including everyone in the city's activities. Can Do was branded as, quote, the first job-experiencing theme park where 3 generations can enjoy themselves. Can Do opened in Bogota, Colombia in January of 2012, with the promise to build 4 more kid cities throughout the country. That same year, Kidzania opened 2 new locations in Santiago, Chile, and another in Mexico City. In 2013, Can Do opened 2 new cities, a second in Colombia in the city of Medellin, and another in Chiba, Japan. At the same time, Kidzania expanded to Kuwait, Egypt, and Thailand. In 2014 and 2015, new Kidzanias opened in Turkey, Saudi Arabia, London, and Brazil. Kidzania's expansion remained aggressive, but just 3 locations in, Can Do had already stalled. In 2015, Can Do Medellin closed its doors after just 2 years of operation. The following year, while Kidzania was expanding to Russia and opening additional fun centers in South Korea and India, Can Do was facing another closure. After 4 years of operation, the Can Do in Bogota, Colombia closed its doors, leaving the Can Do in Japan as the sole operating location. In 2016, the Exchange City in Kansas City ceased operations after several years of financial difficulties and a long series of mayors who couldn't be bothered to take their job seriously. I would have run laps around this kid. I would have...
He still hasn't let it go, has he? He so desperately wanted to be mayor.
won that mayoral race in a landslide. This kid would cry if he saw my campaign. Kansas City's Exchange City was one of the last remaining exchange cities to not transition into a junior achievement biz town, which by the mid-2010s had dozens of locations around the United States.
You're in good hands with Allstate.
Can-Do would finally open an additional location in 2018, when Can-Do Torino debuted in Italy. Also in 2018, Kidzania would open an additional location in Mexico and a new location in Costa Rica. The following year, 4 new Kidzanias were opened, including finally a location in the United States with Kidzania Dallas. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic forced most non-essential businesses to close their doors, including Kid Cities. While most centers would reopen months later with modified experiences, many would cease operations for good during the shutdown. This included 4 Kidzania locations and the Can-Do in Torino, Italy. The latter resulted in Can-Do once again having just a single operating location. Kidzania would recover well in the years following the shutdown, with most locations reopening and several new cities being constructed. As of 2024, 26 Kidzanias are operating, with 5 more in development.
Damn.
Junior Achievement has enjoyed a similar success, with
They're
over
doing
40
something
JA Biz
right,
towns now
Kidzania.
operating throughout the United States. In 2021, Junior Achievement opened a new biz town in Kansas City, bringing the concept back to the city in which it originated. Thanks to the success of Kidzania and JA BizTown, Kid Cities are as popular as ever, a truth that many feel conflicted about. The effects of Kid Cities on children is rife with debate. School curriculums, especially in the United States, are often criticized for being too academic, theoretical, and according to some, useless. It is common to hear complaints that what is taught in schools has no real-world application. Why did we spend so much time learning about the Pythagorean theorem when we could have learned about credit scores or how to start a business? Why did the Department of Education insist that we learn that the mitochondria was the powerhouse of the cell, rather than forcing us to take a government-mandated tax class that would have been great and that no one would have ever complained about? In many ways,
oh my god, I know how that feels so much. Like, I barely use anything from, like, public education in my daily life. Except auto shop. I took auto shop for a year in high school, and that has actually paid off. Because I can do, like, some basic maintenance on my car. But otherwise, like, I've never needed to use anything from my pre-calculus class in daily life. Like, I'm just struggling, like, fucking... I mean, I've never heard such a true statement. I feel like American public education is a bit out of date. Like, it's like he said, it's all going for, like, you know, the theoretical, like the super academics. You hear me? Yeah. I'm pretty sure a lot of people, like, can resonate with that statement.
Kid Cities are the other extreme, showcasing what a curriculum focused on practicality and vocation looks like. Parents and educators alike lauded the Kid Cities for their lessons in financial responsibility and career education. But at the same time, over-preparing children for the quote-unquote real world has its drawbacks. Cementing the inner workings of society into impressionable minds, to some, can come across as an indoctrination of the status quo and existing power structures.
It's very hard in our public school system for people to learn about the free enterprise system that has built America.
If all you do is teach children how to navigate the existing world, they might be less equipped and motivated to change and improve it. Even from a practical perspective, the world is always changing, and the world that you can educate children on when they are 8 will not be the world that they enter when they are 18. The stated reason that Exchange City transitioned into JA BizTown was because the Exchange City curriculum focused heavily on balancing checkbooks and filling out ledgers, skills that were becoming less useful in modern life. Professions also change over time. Today's citizens and junior capitalists can still take up work as a food worker or a firefighter, But new jobs such as Amazon fulfillment warehouse employee and Amazon delivery driver showcase the passage of time in an unsettling way.
Oh my god. There's actually like a job for Amazon employee. Tis truly a sign of the times.
In its current form, Kid Cities act as a supplement to academics, with at most a few weeks of curriculum for the education centers and a focus on entertainment for the fun centers. Kid Cities are able to escape most criticism. But concerns over the presentation of heavier topics and the infiltration of advertising on impressionable minds should be a continuing conversation, and likely deserves more thought than it has been given over the past 40 years of Kid Cities. There will probably never be a consensus on issues such as education style or what age a child should be introduced to McDonald's, but there is a truth found in the Kid City experience that is less controversial and far more depressing. Children will always want to be adults, and adults will always want to be children. Children envy adults for their freedom, while adults view their freedom as responsibility. This is especially true for those that had a relatively privileged childhood, and were not thrust into adult roles at a younger age due to circumstance. It is easy to blame the existence of Kid Cities on capitalism, power structures, or the United States, but those are only influences on the content found within. The concept is universal. Kid Cities are now enjoyed by children all around the world. Even with a different economic system, in a theoretical utopia, the grass will always be greener. And the genius of Kid Cities is that they harness this yearning and build a large-scale set for kids to play out their desire to experience adulthood. Adults, on the other hand, would rather build a fantastical recreation of their childhoods to return to. Envy may be the thief of joy. That is, unless you build a giant simulated environment so that you can experience the object of your envy, in which case, envy rocks, and if managed well, is extremely profitable. And that, kids, is your lesson in the grown-up world. Man, I would have made a great mayor.
He still hasn't let it go. Oh my god, he still hasn't let it go. Man, how long was he holding on to that? He held on to that since the 5th grade. He has been bitter about that since the 5th grade, yo. Oh man. Hang on, I gotta look up. What was it? Kidzania. To Wikipedia. Mexican privately held international chain indoor family entertainment centers, currently operating 30 locations worldwide. Here we go. Current locations. There's the original location of La Ciudad de los Niños, the original Kid City, which has just been renamed to Kidzania, Mexico City. Monterrey, also in Mexico. Tokyo. Jakarta, Indonesia. Let's see here. Lisbon, Portugal. Dubai. Seoul, where is UAE? Yeah, UAE. Kuala Lumpur. Wait, is that Malaysia? Yeah. Santiago, Spain? Oh, Chile. Oh, in Mexico City again. Mumbai. India. Kuwait. Cairo, Egypt. Turkey. Istanbul. Jeddah? Saudi Arabia. Sao Paulo, is that Brazil? Yeah. Moscow. Another one in South Korea, another one in India. Guadalajara, is that Mexico again? Yes. Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Dallas. Oh, another Indonesia one. Another one, Japan. Vietnam? Singapore? Upcoming locations: Taipei, Athens, Hong Kong. Former locations: Manila, Philippines, Bangkok, Thailand, Costa Rica, Johannesburg, South Africa, London. Really? The London one closed down? Wait, is there only the one location in Dallas in the entire US? Kidzania, Dallas. I didn't see any other locations in the US. Wow. It seems like they're doing well. Plus 20 years. But yeah. Poor Kevin Perjurer. Holding on to that bitterness since childhood. uh. Alrighty though. That's gonna be it from me for today. Man. I didn't see that coming. The all those kids cities and whatnot. Alrighty. But yeah. Thank you everyone for stopping by. Hope y'all had fun. I know I did. But not Kevin Perjurer. He had no fun because he didn't get to go. Tomorrow? No, I don't think so. I'm gonna take a day off tomorrow. Wait, today's Thursday, right? Yeah. No, not tomorrow. We didn't get to go either. I guess not. Hang on. Well, hang on. What kid CDs were there in like the fecking US? It was like JA Biztown or something like that. JA Biztown. I feel like that's give. Oh wait, no. Hang on. Huh. It seems there's one relatively close by to me. Although I'm not sure when that opened up. All right. I'm ending stream, right? But yeah, thanks for stopping by. Thank you to anyone watching the VOD. Thank you to the fortune tellers, as always. All right. Let me see who I can raid. Refresh. All right. Nothing but the big shots on my follow list are streaming right now. Let's go find someone playing GeoGuessr. Decisions. Alright, I think I found someone. Let's go say hi, shall we? Da, da, da. Here we go. Okie doke. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. Remember to hydrate, rest up, all that good jazz. Tasty snacks. Don't forget that Kevin Perjurer is still bitter about not being mayor. Bye-bye!